Good morning and welcome to the Redevelopment Commission Strategic Planning Session. This is the second session we've had like this, and this is scheduled from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. today. We will be finished by 12 p.m. today. This is Saturday, and I really appreciate all of you coming and joining us this morning. I do want to, this is a public meeting, so for the public, I want to remind everybody that the New Bern Redevelopment Commission is a public body appointed by the aldermen of the city of New Bern, and it's a public body governed by the North Carolina general statutes, particularly the open meeting laws. And with that, I'll get you to give us a roll call, please.
Absolutely. Sharon Bryan, Jimmy Dillahunt,
Here.
Sarah Proctor,
Here.
Andrew Morgan Jr.,
Here.
Steve Strickland,
Here.
Julius Parham,
Here.
Tabari Wallace, Beth Walker,
Here.
Kit Paragoy.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Great, that is good, because we got things to do. Before we approve the agenda, I just want to take a minute to recognize we've been, as we know, in a commission that started 5 years ago, 2018, a little bit more than that now. We're in the 5.5-year mark. So I would like to take a minute and recognize those commissioners who have been on the commission since its inception. That is Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Paragoy, Commissioner Strickland, and not with us today, Commissioner Wallace. I also would like to recognize Commissioner Theresa Lee. She is not here with us, but she was the chairwoman of this commission for 5 years, just minus a couple of months. So I think we need to recognize her. And then welcome. You know, our newer members are Commissioner Parham, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Dillahunt, and Commissioner Bryan, who is not here with us, but is she joining us?
She's in Raleigh today. She's excused.
Okay, but was she going to join us by video? Okay, we're just filling. All right, well, with that, the next order of business is to approve our agenda. Everybody has that? Is that in our book too? Yes, it is. Very first page in the book. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second? Have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
No, sir.
The motion carries, and we will move on with our order of business for the day. We have historically always started our meetings with our guiding principles. And our guiding principles were developed, decided on the commission, voted in at a time when we didn't have a redevelopment plan, we didn't have boundaries for the redevelopment area. And so we worked together with the guiding principles to build the the redevelopment document, to build the area, and to understand what we were trying to do on the redevelopment commission. So this morning, I want to change the pace a little bit since this is our strategic planning session. I want to remind everybody what our mission statement is, because I feel like our guiding principles have led us to the development of our plan and our mission statement. So I'm going to start by reading the mission statement this morning. And that's in the first agenda item in your booklet. And our mission statement says, the New Bern Redevelopment Commission, leading the way for community transformation and improvement by directly addressing community needs in the vital areas of public health, infrastructure, housing, and economic development. The Commission is committed to an accountable, transparent, and publicly driven process. And I think we've seen that be the case over the past 5 years. With that mindset, I would like to introduce Dr. Reginal this morning and let him give us a little presentation. I met Dr. Barner yesterday. We toured through the Walt Bellamy homes, and I learned information that I think we all need to know when we're thinking about affordable housing and what our mission is to provide good housing stock in the redevelopment area. So,
You want to read the bio at all, or just mention it's in the front
Oh.
page of your
I don't want to read his bio
That's good.
because that's a lot, but
It's not
I'm going to let
necessary.
you tell us just a little bit about yourself and why you're here. How's
All
that?
right. Well, first of all, he says doctor, but I'm not a doctor, so he just calls me that. But I want to make sure for legal purposes and for everything else, I'm not claiming to be a PhD. First of all, thank you all for the opportunity to come. Initially, so I have a little. I told Beth yesterday. I got a little joke with Zeb on this particular issue. Zeb said a few weeks back, he said, Reggie, we're having the strategic planning session for the Redevelopment Commission. Could you attend? And I said, sure. And I said, well, it's a Saturday, so well, can I attend by Zoom or do I need to be there in person? And he says, well, I prefer if you're there in person. And I said, okay. And then on Wednesday, we had lunch. Thursday, we had lunch. And he said, so we'll do the opening and then I'll turn it over to you. I said, wait a minute. You said, could I attend your session? You never said anything about being one of the presenters. But with that being said, I'm always ready, especially when it comes to housing and housing-related issues. And so, as Beth said, little background, and I'll get to ultimately why I'm in New Bern, but I'm originally from Greenville, South Carolina. I live in Aiken, South Carolina now, which is kind of on the border between Georgia and South Carolina. I've been in the housing business since 1986. Started my career in Greenville, South Carolina, and then left the Housing Authority, the City of Greenville, two of the largest white churches in Greenville, First Baptist and Buncombe Street United Methodist Church. At that time, Governor Digg was governor, or had been governor, became Secretary of Education, and he attended Buncombe Street. Carol Campbell was a congressman, former governor. He attended First Baptist. They got together with the city and Florida Daniel, large construction company, to develop an inner city revitalization plan for Greenville. And I don't know if you all have been in Greenville, South Carolina recently, but where the baseball stadium is, that used to be slums and homeless and very desolate area. And so in 1987, 88, I left the Housing Authority because I kind of in my early 20s built a name of learning this business, and so they dubbed me to be the first director for redevelopment of the West Washington Street area where the railroad is, and the area of what it was called then, and now it's called West End, or South Main Street in Greenville where the baseball stadium is. We developed a 25-year redevelopment plan for that area, and to kind of get rid of blight and those kinds of things. And so that's kind of how I got my start, and then we moved back, my wife and I moved back to Augusta, Georgia area, and then in 1994 I took over the housing agency. And so my whole premise when I took over the housing agency in 94 was that we do a good job of putting people in housing, but housing is only one component of what we need to do for people. And so I don't say low income, I say low wealth. So the low wealth families that we were charged with serving, it was to build an opportunity not only for them to gain employment besides housing, but also create home ownership. Because what's the number one wealth building tool in America? It's equity in our homes. And so what we find, and you all know this better than I do, there was a period of time, and still to some degree, but it was more prevalent during those period of time where redlining existed in a lot of the low income communities, low wealth communities, where banks made a conscious decision not to invest in minority communities. And so we began, at least in my career, I began the process of making sure that we developed a mechanism by which we could help facilitate creating more homeownership opportunities for families. And I'll talk a little bit about that strategy and how I've been able to try to accomplish that. Why am I in New Bern? When I retired, Mr. Parham in 2018, the head office in South Carolina called and said, Reggie, you're retiring next month? I said, yeah. I said, well, the CEO in Spartanburg, South Carolina is moving to Daytona Beach, And because they're engaged in development, they need somebody that has a development background, HUD, public housing, but also a development background to be interim CEO. And I said, okay, how long? And they said 6 months. And 19 months later, I was still there, but we did hire a CEO. And then at the same time, Columbia, South Carolina asked me, so I'm still in Spartanburg, we're transitioning. So then the young lady that was in Greenville moved to Columbia. And so I ran Greenville and Spartanburg at the same time. And then one of my employees applied and became the CEO or executive director of the New Bern Housing Authority. She ran the Section 8 program. And then she said, hey, Reggie, we got this Trent Court issue with the flood that happened in 2018. Would you be willing to help us look at, it's been going on for some time, would you be willing to help us look at how we can get off the dime with FEMA and everybody else as it relates to the funding for that issue? And so I've been working in New Bern for about the last year and a half. And then when she made a decision to leave and take a job back in South Carolina, the board says, well, Reggie's familiar already with what we're doing, and it's kind of leading the charge with what we're doing with FEMA and Chik Fil A and everybody else. Would you be willing to serve as the interim here? So I'm here 3 days a week as the interim executive director for the New Bern Housing Authority, but I still do consulting work all over the country. And so that's kind of why I'm here and how I got to New Bern and met Zeb, because Zeb was a former commissioner on the Housing Authority Board. So let me talk a little bit about and ask you all a question. And as I was beginning to think about, as Zeb asked me to be one of the presenters, and looking at the Redevelopment Commission, the first question I'll ask you all as you look at your strategy and strategic plan is, really, who are you? And then the next question is, who do you want to grow? When you grow up, who do you want to be? Okay? Because I think ultimately that's the question that you got to ask yourself is, you know the charter, but when you grow up, who do you really want to be? Who do you really want for New Bern, North Carolina? Who do you really want the Redevelopment Commission? Is it an authority? Is it going to just stay a commission? Do you want to be a developer? Do you want to own property? As Beth was talking to and mentioned yesterday, that really your charge is to develop the housing, create homeownership opportunities, but not be a landlord necessarily. But the question is that really who you want to be? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some strategies, and hopefully I can pose some questions to you that will make you think about long term, ultimately, what are those opportunities and what do you really want to do? Because I'm going to drag you all, along with Zeb, kicking and screaming into the New Bern Housing Authority's world over these next few months on what we're going to do with Trent Court and the redevelopment there. Because I think that's an opportunity for you all. I'm all about collaboration, okay? So for me, for the Redevelopment Commission and the Housing Authority not to have a collaborative effort makes no sense to me, okay? And so as we begin down this road, part of the question today is, again, who do you want to be when you grow up? What are those opportunities and how do we get there? So let's talk about current strategies. So part of that, and Zeb mentioned this not directly to me, but indirectly, as we were having a conversation the other day, and you didn't realize that I listen to everything he says. And one of the questions is, how are you going to fund this organization long term? Has the city really sat down with you all and talked about a funding strategy? And you're shaking your head no, you know. Have you all honestly sat down and had a real conversation with Cedar leadership about how is this organization going to operate and continue to provide a benefit to the community? Is that through a bonding of some capacity that the city issues for housing and affordable housing? Is that through a mechanism by which you all serve as a developer? It goes back to what Beth says. Is that a mechanism by which you own property and you earn a fee off that property? And so therefore you have reoccurring income that will sustain the organization. Is there direct appropriation from the alderman? Okay? Is there direct appropriation from the alderman that comes to this organization every day through from a budget standpoint. Zeb was talking about, again, indirectly about here I am, I'm here now, a little bit of the money comes from this pot, a little bit of the money that comes from this pot, but ultimately it makes it work. Well, that makes it work for what? A staff person. But what does that mean from an organizational standpoint to develop housing in the community? So how can you be charged with developing something with no resources that's appropriated and designated to do that? So old people used to say it's like opening the window in the wintertime and letting the heat go out. Okay? Because ultimately, how do you do that? How do you ultimately build housing and develop a strategy around housing within a community and you have no resources to be able to do that? And it's nice, it's a nice thought to say, oh, well, we got the Redevelopment Commission and you all come together on a Saturday morning for 3 hours to talk about it. But ultimately, you walk out of here, and if I have $5 to my name, what does that mean? And it's more than just having, Zeb did not leave his job to take this job just to be the executive director of the Redevelopment Commission that ultimately can't do anything. Which brings me back to the point that I made, is that is why for me, as I shared with him, it's important that the strategy along the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Commission play an integral part in how both entities can ultimately benefit the community. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So and then the other strategy around that is what I would always say, because of the Redevelopment Commission, you all would want to create a land trust, a community land trust, a housing land trust. Well, ultimately, you have a de facto land trust, because right now, what? The city buys property, and then it does what? It deeds it over to the Redevelopment Commission, and then you all then utilize it in some mechanism to develop or plan to develop housing. Well, here's a question. What is the strategy around that housing? Do you sell it? Do you lease it? Do you grant it? Do you get any money back for it? If I sell the house that we build on that property, where does the money go? It's program income. How do you plan to utilize it? If I give a grant to a homeowner for down payment and closing costs, is it a forgivable grant? Is it a repayable grant? Is it a deed restriction that's placed on that house that in 20 years, when I decide to sell that house and housing prices in New Bern continue to go up and you sell that house in 20 years, do we have a deed restriction on that house that a portion of that proceeds of that $20,000 in down payment and closing costs we gave 20 years earlier, does it come back to the agency? So we have a fund that we're creating that can replenish itself? Or do we do, so I talked about Greenville. So in 1987, 88, the city of Greenville is getting millions of dollars in community development block grant funds. And they did a wonderful, wonderful job of creating affordable housing and granting down payment and closing cost assistance to these families. And they put a deed restriction on it that you, as a low-income buyer, had to live in this house for a minimum of 10 years, and if you did, that money was then forgiven. So if I sold a house at the end of that 10 years, who gets the benefit? The homeowner, right? Greenville County Redevelopment Commission says, oh, hold on. We're going to grant you that $20,000. But when you sell that house, whenever you sell that house, that $20,000 is coming back to the Redevelopment Commission, and we then are going to loan that or grant that back out again. Now take 20 years. So if I got $1 million a year and I'm granting $20,000 in down payment and closing costs, and in 10 years, 20 years, it goes away, what comes back to the city of Greenville? Nothing. The Redevelopment Commission said, I don't care when you sell it. As long as you stay in it, as long as it's yours, doesn't matter to us, but once you refinance it, But once you sell it, we want what? Our $20,000 back. Now, let's take 20 years of $1 million a year that I'm granting, and year 21, you start selling houses off. What has happened now to the Greenville County Redevelopment Commission? They got a housing fund that will always do what? Replenish itself. So what did I come back at the beginning of my discussion and say? Who are you and who do you want to be when you grow up? You got to start thinking about what it is you are going to do with this organization and how do you want this organization to operate long term, and what does that look like? It's not a black-white issue. It's an economics issue. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've never one time talked to city council, or in you all's case, alderman, about what I'm planning to build, or who I'm planning to build it for. I do talk about the economic impact. Okay? Right now, you can look it up. I'm working with an organization in Granville, South Carolina, in Aiken County, where we're taking an old textile mill, which was one of the first textile mills built in 1900, and we're redeveloping it into 212 market rate apartments. And the county council chairman said at the groundbreaking, I've been working on that project for 15 years. Now, one thing about me is once I get a hold to something and I believe in it, it doesn't matter if it takes a year or 20 years. Once I stick with it, I'm going to see it to a closing because I believe in it. So here is a traditional community that was a mill village. The train wreck happened in 2005 where it was a chlorine spill, the mill shut down, 9 people perished, and all these jobs were lost. So now I'm taking, years later, this textile mill, partnering with the group and redeveloping it. And hear me, the county council chairman stood before the podium on our dedication back in July and said, Reggie has brought in over 100 years, it's a $60 million project. That is the largest economic impact to this part of the county in over 100 years. Why? We don't have a problem. What's the largest employer in Craven County?
Sheriff City. Yeah.
Okay, let's like a plan for it, something like that.
You're gonna be warehousing and you're gonna have Bosch.
Okay, so let's take Bosch. If the state, Craven County, and the city of Newbern was trying to recruit Bosch, what does it do? Gives economic incentives, right? But nobody ever thinks about economic incentives for housing. Housing is economic development. Who do you want to be when you grow up? And what are you going to do about it? When I talked about how I left the housing authority and ran a nonprofit at 25 years old, one of the things when I was traveling around with Florida Dames and the city and all of them, you know what corporations, the BMWs of the world that was coming in, and I had the opportunity to sit at the table in my 20s to listen. You know what they asked the question? I know where my top executives are going to live in Greenville County. But where are the people that's working in my plant going to live? Where are their kids going to be educated? So if I'm not concerned about the communities that my employees are working in and living in, then what difference are we really making in the community? So we focused on making sure that the schools and the housing conditions for those individuals that were involved in working in the plant had sustainable, suitable housing, just like, so it didn't do us any good to spend hundreds of millions of dollars of tax-based revenue or deductions, because what do we do to economic development? We give them a tax break for 15, 20 years to bring in those new jobs. But is the Redevelopment Commission pushing for any type of tax incentives to incentivize somebody to create attainable, you know what attainable housing is now? So there's workforce housing, there's attainable housing, and there's affordable housing. Now, I believe the contention is what's affordable to me and what's affordable to you is two different things. What did I say yesterday, Beth? Affordable housing is not what we build. Affordable housing is how we finance. Brick is brick. Lumber is lumber. Sheetrock is sheetrock. You don't get a discount at Lowe's because you say you're going to build affordable housing. They're going to charge you the same amount for that sheetrock, for that affordable house, as they're going to charge you for $1 million house. Sheetrock is sheetrock. Brick is brick. You get me? So with that being said, so affordable housing is not what we're building, but guess who has to be the voice for the voiceless? You all. Your job is to educate the community that when we talk about building affordable housing, attainable housing, or workforce housing, we're not talking about something that people think is substandard and it's the old public housing. Quite frankly, public housing is withstood a whole lot, so it wasn't badly built. It just was who it was targeted to. And I'm going to talk about the Brooke Amendment for a minute to share with you that in 1969. But hear me. So when we talk about that, we're not talking about what we're building. It's how we finance it. So we finance it by subsidy. Okay? And so how we make if the square footage cost for a house is $150 a foot, and I got 1,000 square foot house, it's $150,000. If I can't afford $150,000, then how do I make it affordable? I make it affordable by providing a subsidy. So if I put that $20,000 in subsidy into that house, then now I can take it from 150 to 130, and now that may make it affordable for somebody else. Okay? And so, but then go back to what I said. Are you going to grant it and never get anything back? Or are you going to put a restriction on it, and when they sell it, you get something back? That's ultimately what you all got to make a decision on. But first, you got to make a decision on how we're going to get some funds to be able to do that. And that hasn't been answered yet by the city, by the county, by you all. As an organization, you all got to decide, are we going to the North Carolina legislature and ask for our state senator and our representative to ask for some appropriations for some money to give us seed funds to help the Redevelopment Commission jumpstart its vision locally in the community? I do some work in the city of Augusta, Georgia. And the city of Augusta has a program where they floated bonds, the city floated bonds for homeownership. Okay? So they got a program where they'll give up to $40,000 in subsidy. The Medical College of Georgia is two blocks away from it. And so they're trying to incentivize the Bethlehem area for redevelopment. And so they're creating homeownership. So now we got young doctors, black, white, blue, or green, moving into this traditionally African American community. And the city is incentivizing it to giving up to $40,000 in down payment and closing costs. It's repayable. A portion is repayable, a portion is forgiven, but you got to live in the house for a certain period of time. Okay? The other thing that we do is when we give that down payment and closing cost, if we don't put restrictions on it, what happens? There are motions out there. So if I give a low-income family a down payment and closing cost of $30,000 on a $150,000 house, and they move in next year, buy that house, and then here's this loan shark who calls them and says, you can borrow $20,000 against your house and get a second mortgage. Will they lose it? Yeah, because they can't afford it. That payment shock of that additional mortgage is going to spiral them into foreclosure. And then because you didn't put a deed restriction on that down payment and closing costs, you've lost the house. So when you do those kind of programs, do you want to make sure that you put the deed restriction on it? And then the other thing that you want to do is make sure that you put first right of refusal, that the Redevelopment Commission gets the first right to buy it back with a stipulation. Here's the stipulation that some communities do. At the time of sale, because the Redevelopment Commission built it and the Redevelopment Commission is selling it to you, we're going to put a stipulation that our first right of refusal is based off of an appreciation value. You remember when the housing market crashed in 2008? Do you know why it crashed? Just one person tell me why they think the housing market crashed. You think because banks made bad loans?
People got stuff.
They gave too many people loans.
Exactly. Because the payment shop, they were giving loans at 110, 120% of value. So people were doing arm loans and buying houses in Atlanta, Georgia. So they were buying a house at 110, 120, 150% of value. So they buy a house and then go buy a Mercedes because they got an interest-only loan. And then when that thing ballooned in 4 years, now you got that house note, you got a nice new car, and you got that house note, but now that principal and interest come due, that interest only is going away. And it crashed. But no, not only that. Why do you think Wall Street was concerned? Because what banks do, y'all, is banks, First Citizen makes the loan. They package those loans and they sell those loans to Wall Street. It's not about the bank. It's not about you as a buyer. What made it crash was Wall Street bought that paper. And then you remember in the news they were talking about China and Japan being affected by the U.S. housing market? You know why? Who bought that paper from Goldman Sachs? China. That's why globally it affects us. Do you recognize that if the housing market in the United States crashed, America is gone? Forget everything else. The housing market controls the U.S. economy. So those are the kinds of things that I'm sharing with you that you all as the Redevelopment Commission have the ability and the authority to be able to make a decision and have to make a decision on who do you want to be, what is it that you're going to represent, what type of programs that you want to focus on. Because as you can hear the things that I'm sharing with you, you got a lot of opportunities. Now, you can't be like a friend of mine that's a doctor who wants to get into real estate and I tell her she got 5 people living in her head rent free. Because every day she calls me with a new idea of what she want to do, and I'm saying, you got to focus. You know, you got the financial wherewithal to do what you want to do, but them 5 people in your head living rent free, you got to take one of them to focus on what you want to do. And that's what I'm sharing with you all, is part of your strategic planning is deciding who the Redevelopment Commission is going to be. So Zeb, as your executive director, can then have what he needs to know what direction you all want him to focus on and what direction he can help lead you in to be able to do that. How can I help? How do I plan to help in that process? Is when you get a moment, look up the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, and they have what is called, they put out every year, the governor has to sign, it's called a Qualified Allocation Plan. And so HUD is not in the affordable housing new construction business. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. HUD is not in the affordable housing rental new construction business. They got out of the public housing business a long time ago. Okay, so when you hear people talk about RAD and all these other things related to public housing, why? Because they were built. The 37 Housing Act that Roosevelt put together, in my view, was one of the best documents that's ever been put together. Do you know that that the Housing Act that was in 37 was put together, we still have not utilized all of the things that were put in that Housing Act in 1937. And it still stands to this day. We've modified it, but we've never done away with it. Because that document has stood the test of time. And there's so many things that we can do. The Qualified Allocation Plan, y'all have heard of the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program? Is that a HUD program? It builds housing. Since 1986, it is the largest producer of affordable housing in this country. Is it a housing program? Let me go back. It is 1986. It has been the largest producer in the United States of affordable housing in this country.
What's that about?
The Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. Since 1986. Is it a housing program? No. It is Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code. All right? Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code. Why? Does anybody really care about affordable housing? Excuse my language, heck no. But do they care about tax credits? Does corporations enjoy the benefit of tax credit? Let's go back to I said economic development, right? So, tell you a story. I go into a banker, young guy, sit down with him, I'm running a housing agency, and I say to him, I want to get a loan that I'm building a $10 million development, and all I need is $1 million loan. Hear what I just said now? I'm building a $10 million development, and I need $1 million loan. Will you give me the loan for the housing agency's nonprofit, which is the equivalent of a redevelopment commission? Young banker says no. I said, well, let me talk to the city exec who's over that region, because surely, y'all know like I do, loans are made on what? Loan to value. So if I got a $10 million development and I'm only asking for $1 million, then surely it's a no-brainer that you're going to give me $1 million loan. Go to the city exec and he says, we don't make those kind of loans. Now I'm talking to a B of A guy back then. I said, you don't? You sure? No, that's not our specialty, that's not where we focus, yada, yada, yada. I said, well, let me ask you this question. Do you know about the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program? I said, no. Do you know, city exec, about the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program? No. I said, so do you recognize that Bank of America is the largest purchaser of low income housing tax credits in the country at that time? Well, what is it? I said, call your Charlotte office and get some information, and then let us have another conversation. So they call the Charlotte office, get some information, and not only do they call me back, they bring people from Charlotte down to meet with me. Because they say, oh, absolutely. We make these kind of loans. Because here's how it works. Every state gets an allocation of credits from the federal government to the state based on the per capita of the state. And the state then puts together a plan and puts it out on the street, and developers apply for those credits to build housing. And in turn, there's a 9% credit and there's a 4% credit. So let's focus on the 9% and go back to my $10 million deal. If I got a $10 million deal and I got a 9% credit, and I do 9% on $10 million per year for 10 years. How much did I raise if I sold it for $1? $9 million, right? So B of A buys those credits. And I get the credits to build housing. that never have to pay back. They in turn use the credits against their corporate income tax for 10 years. And I get the $9 million to build affordable housing, and the only loan that I'm talking about is $1 million on a $10 million deal. That's a good deal, isn't it? You doggone right it is. But the little banker had no idea that his bank was the largest purchaser at that time of credits.
So is this still a valuable piece?
Yes, sir. So what I said to Zaya is, now, right now, the Redevelopment Commission can't go get any of these credits because this document lays out what are the rules and regulations that are applicable to being able to do that. And one of them is so, development experience. To be eligible for an award of 9% credits, at least one principal must have successfully developed, operated, and maintained in compliance either one 9% tax credit project in North Carolina or 6 separate 9% tax credit projects totaling in excess of 200 units. The projects must have been placed in service between January 2016 and January 1st, 2023. Okay? Become a general partner or managing member of an ownership entity. So I'm gonna go back to what I said at the beginning. Who are you? And who do you want to be when you grow up? So, all you got to do, which is what I'm going to help you do, or at least I want to help you do, okay, is as we as New Bern Housing Authority begin to redevelop Trent Court, I'm going to do what? I want to make the Redevelopment Commission our development partner. Once I put you on one deal, what does it say you're able to do after that?
Make some more deals.
Exactly. But you got to do one what? First. Okay? And you all have to make a decision, is if that's something you as a commission want to do. Federal Home Loan Bank. So I served on the Federal Home Loan Bank. You see on my bio, I served on the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta's advisory board for 2 terms on the advisory board some years back. So in 1985, there was another savings and loan crisis that happened. Jim, I don't think you're old enough to remember that. Okay. So in 85, y'all know that there was a savings and loan crisis back in 85. So what Congress did at that time is they required, you can Google and look it up, there's a legislation called File Bill. And so the federal government required federal home loan banks set aside 10% of their profits annually to make grants available within their markets. So it's called the Affordable Housing Program. And so the Federal Home Loan Bank, on an annual basis, you apply, and you can apply for grants to go with programs, and you can do it from ownership side, and you can do it on the affordable housing side to get subsidy, those kinds of things. Years ago, it was $500,000. This year, the limit is $1 million. So you can apply for $1 million grant through the Federal Home Loan Bank. Okay.
Can this commission do that?
Yeah. So this commission can do a whole lot of things. This part.
But what's the but piece?
The but is you got to decide who you want to be when you grow up.
So that means decide on how much you want to tackle.
You got to decide where. Go back to what Beth said here. Your mission statement is broad. You all got to decide on, are we a developer? Are we going to engaged. Now, that doesn't give him carte blanche to go out and do anything he want to do. That's not what I'm advocating. What I'm advocating is, as an entity, do you say, we are the development arm, because by statute, Lord, you are a separate nonprofit affiliate entity of the city.
We are a separate public body.
Of the city.
Right.
So you all are appointed as a commission to be able to facilitate and do those type of things. Everything that I'm talking to you about, you're able and eligible to do.
Redevelopment commissions generally are able and empowered with these powers.
You all then have to work within the bodies to be able to do those things, and then you all have to adopt and choose what it is that you want to do. There are funding sources that you can tap into. There are nuances to all of these. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's easy, because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Because I'm going to use a Jesse Jackson quote. If not me, then who? If not you, then who? Honestly, if you all, as a redevelopment commission, don't do it, forget the New Bern Housing Authority for a minute. If you all, as a redevelopment commission, don't do it, then the question is, who is going to do it? Now, are you part of the solution? Or are you part of the problem? You can keep talking about the problem, and we know the problem exists. Because go back to attainable. It's gone beyond affordable housing at this point. We into the attainable housing. That's the missing middle. That's the people that make $1 too much to be considered for affordable housing and not enough to buy anything that's on the market.
Let me ask you a question. And because you're the housing authority, and most of this conversation here is housing, but in our plan, there are other elements that we are trying to do, health, you developing your neighborhoods. How does that go on? Because we're just not housing. I guess we just got a big circle.
Yes, sir.
Right.
So, and one of the things I share, and I know I want to be mindful of your time, but so because the majority of the areas that you probably would focus on is in a low-income census tract, the other thing that you'll focus on and look at is new market tax credits. Okay? So new market tax credits are similar to housing tax credits in the sense that, so I'm working in Minneapolis right now, so anybody basketball fans? So there's a guy named Devin George who played for the Lakers for 11 years, and he's from Minneapolis, won some championships with Kobe and Shaq. I'm working with him, he's one of my clients, and I've been working with him for a number of years to do affordable housing. We just got approved for $21 million to build a modular plant in North Minneapolis between state money and new market tax credits. We got 4 banks investing in those new market tax credits to bring 350 new jobs to the inner city of North Minneapolis, utilizing new market tax credits. So the answer,
New market tax credits.
so to answer your question is on the commercial retail development side, you can utilize new market tax credits to build healthcare facilities, commercial facilities, retail, all of those kinds of things. And so there are funding sources that are available to help facilitate that. Again, going back to your point, Ms. Park, that is where the Redevelopment Commission, through your charge and your vision, your direction, allows ZEA on behalf, in conjunction with the city, to look at all of those funding sources to be able to do those things. And that is where, so in closing, and I'll open up for questions, in closing, that is where my role as the interim, as I've said to ZEA, I want to partner with the Redevelopment Commission. So as we begin to look at, can I borrow your document for a minute?
Yes.
So in my view, this is one of the greatest documents that y'all have at your disposal, okay? We've been fighting since I got here with FEMA and others to get funding. My board, I got my board approved last month, the approval to put an RFP out for a new CNI consultant to work with us, you all, and the city for this year to apply in the fall, hopefully, for the implementation grant that comes along with the CNI implementation, okay? We just secured from FEMA over $8 million that they awarded at the end of December for us to do the planning process for the redevelopment of Trent Court. Not just for Trent Court proper, but for the redevelopment. So we're gonna use this document as our guide to put together a master plan for what we're gonna do there and use that $8 million, $7 million that's available, because we're gonna take those Charles Taylor building and turn it into the Housing Authority's administrative office and get them back into the community. So we're gonna redevelop that building into their admin office, but we're gonna use some of those funds, with hopefully with city funds, to go after, put together a master plan for redevelopment for the area. I think there's opportunity for commercial redevelopment within the 5 Points area. We're looking at other areas that Zeb can talk about, the schools and other things for housing and other things like that. But my goal, Commission, is to bring to you all, through Zeb, an opportunity to partner with the housing agency to do these projects where you all then can get the experience points that we talk about here. So then some point in the future, you can spend on your own to be able to do that. Now, still where you need resources, I can't fix all that problem. What I can fix is, if I make you a partner with us on development, then that means you get developer fee. So remember that $10 million example I gave? If you do a $10 million deal, it allows you to earn 15% developer fee. So if we earn $1.5 million in developer fee, and I make you my 30% partner, then you earn a developer fee. And then that'll help.
We can fund ourselves.
Exactly. So my whole thing is, I'm never gonna ask you to ask somebody for something, meaning the city or somebody else, if you don't have a mechanism to create some income yourself as well. But ultimately, going back to what Jamie said, ultimately, you all then have to decide, are those the type of programs that you want to be engaged in and involved in, okay? So, I know I've said a lot. I hope I've given you a good overview of what opportunities are, what the commission can do. Ultimately, it's your decision. From there, I like the mission of what the Redevelopment Commission can do. But in closing, when you grow up, you got to decide who you want to be, what you're going to do, and what direction you're going to go. But it is going to take tough skin. It is going to take some advocacy to open doors and opportunities with people in the community that don't understand what it is that you're going to be pushing for. It's also going to take you all stepping out of your comfort zone to learn more about what those opportunities are, to be the advocate. Because again, I always will say this, I always remember this in closing. You all are the voice for the voiceless. That is the job being on this commission, is you're advocating for redevelopment in areas that otherwise wouldn't get redeveloped. And so it's your charge that you take to serve on this commission to advocate for those areas that otherwise wouldn't get the voice at the table. Thank you.
Couple
Yeah.
questions. Now, are we competing with other agencies as far as HUD, the Housing Authority? So what's the difference of those agencies acquiring money than us acquiring money?
So part of that initiative is collaboration. Whenever you have a collaborative effort, that's why with the CNI, we're going to do this in a collaborative fashion with the city with you all and the housing agency. When we go apply for funding and we can demonstrate that we're going on a united front, it makes us more competitive than when we go alone. And what happens a lot of times, if the city of New Bern tried to apply for something on their own versus having a collaboration with the housing agency, then there's a chance of us getting it is slain. By all three of us joining forces together and bringing our constituencies together and advocate for it, then we stand a better chance. So when we go as a united front, we can compete against the Raleighs of the world when we go as a united front. So that's never been my concern as it relates to that. So that's the difference of being able to be competitive. That plan that I shared is a great plan. When we do it in a united front and in a collaborative effort, then we can make sure that with the right grant writers and the right collaboration, we can be very competitive. Now, once again, we got to get Congressman Murphy involved. We got to get the federal senators involved. So once we demonstrate from a collaborative, from a community that we're all on the same page, and then we get our politicians involved to advocate for what we're pushing for, that's how we do it. And I'll say this, it's not a Democrat or Republican statement. It is a true statement. In my 30 years, I've gotten more or just as much for my housing programs and Republican administrations as much as I've gotten in Democratic administrations. So I'm just sharing with you openly as a commission, don't let political affiliations dictate what you feel like you can and cannot get for your local community. Because when we go into that on a united front, we've been very successful always when we have been able to do it, regardless of party affiliation.
Sorry.
Yeah, workforce housing. You were talking about the same role in affordable housing, but workforce housing. How can we get more information, or do you have any experience with that? Bertie County just, I don't know if you heard, Bertie County just opened up and did a ribbon cutting for their teacher housing they had. They went at it alone with the county commissioners. But as a result of that, it's been so successful. Now, Raleigh has said if you build another one, they want a piece of it. So I'm trying to, no need to redo the wheel. I mean, we need it here. We have a teacher shortage here, and they just opened those apartments out on 70, going out. $2,500 for one bedroom. A teacher cannot afford it. That's a whole month's check. So that's another way to bring in a partner, i.e. the school system. So you have an expertise with that.
Yes, sir. So let's go back to what you said. You said, which goes back to what I started with. What did you say? The county, and that county, took it on and invested in it. It's a local community making a local decision. What I'm saying is, if you all advocate, here's what I'm saying for you. If Craven County doesn't have the equivalent of a redevelopment commission, and what I've understood in my year and a half been in the community is the county has given the redevelopment commission land too, correct? Correct. Which means y'all are that entity. Who do you want to be when you grow up? You got to also foster relationships, not just with the alderman, but with the county commission as well, okay? So to your point is, if I do that and we push that particular issue, because we talked about this with the FR Dennis, okay? So South Carolina, so I'm gonna go to the state level, okay, you see your question. The state of South Carolina said, we have a teacher issue, and we more so have a teacher issue in rural South Carolina. So let's go back to economic development again. The state that has a small city program through the state economic commerce department. So they gave grants to small rural South Carolina cities to help facilitate to bring teacher housing into those communities. So people were taking storefronts downtown in small rural South Carolina and building apartments up above those facilities and giving the owner or developer a grant incentive to be able to do just what you said. I'm gonna take this storefront downtown, I'm gonna redevelop it into apartments, and because it costs $200,000 per unit to build, and a teacher can't afford what I say, affordable housing is not what we build, it's how we finance it. 200,000 is 200,000. I can't get 200,000 from a first year teacher. If that teacher can afford $900, I gotta incentivize and subsidize that development cost that teacher can afford to live there. So the state, through the Department of Commerce, gave a grant to be able to subsidize that redevelopment of that unit, so then the teacher can afford to pay $900 a month. Because what was happening? Teachers were going to rural South Carolina and then driving when they got off work to Columbia, to Greenville, to Charleston, or in some cases, if you're in Hilton Head area, they were going to Savannah. You follow me? Because they were working in those small rural communities, but they were driving when they got off to major cities because there was no place for them to live, and then two, it was costing too much. So this way, then how is it economic development? Then you now got those teachers living in the community. So what are they doing? They're buying groceries in the community. They're getting gas in the community. They're doing all of those things in the local community. And that is where you create that economic development. Allendale, South Carolina. When I tell you Allendale, South Carolina has the highest rate of everything wrong in the country. No, I'm being serious.
What's the name of the place?
Allendale, South Carolina. Highway 301 went through Allendale years ago, and when they built 95, they lost it all. And so therefore it's the poorest county. You saw the 60 Minutes report about 10 years ago where they picked people up at 4 a.m. on buses and drive them to Hilton Head Island to work, and then they catch the bus at 11 o'clock at night to drive back. So everything wrong, they're the highest. Well, there's a 2-year component of the University of South Carolina, Salkehatchie, which is a 2-year component. I built a dorm. I built a 100-unit dormitory in Allendale. Why? Because if we can start getting students to live there, then what happens? They go to the grocery store, they do those things. So how did I fund it? I funded it through USDA Community Facility Program. Okay, so the Community Facility Program builds hospitals or medical facilities, whatever, but we use the Community Facility Program in rural South Carolina to build a 100-unit dormitory. So I'm just sharing with you, there are ways. You got to think outside the box, and then you got to look at the funding source. And we had to fight for 2 years to use the Community Facility Program to build dorms, but we had to take a lot of visits to DC to be able to do that. But you got to be willing to do that. Or, as I said, go to the state level and say, we need teacher housing, but we need to incentivize it, because why? It's not what we're building, it's what? It's how we finance it. So we got to get out of the how we build it. The cost is the cost. We can't change that. What we can do is we fight for the subsidy of how it's financed, which then ultimately makes it affordable for teachers to be able to pay that amount. That's how we make that happen.
Thank you. One more quick question. The relationship that we have with Craven County, this redevelopment and the city of New Bern, is there a way that we can hook up Craven County with this program that we're working on?
Yes, sir.
First, I'm asking, do they have a redevelopment, or can we partner up with Craven County?
So really, I think that you already do, because they already give you all, from my understanding, whenever they get access land like that, you all are already tapping into it. So I think y'all already have a pretty good relationship. Again, as you decide what your goals and missions are, and as you begin to ask for funding and resources, that's where you want to sit down and bring both parties together to help go towards your bottom line budget. Because again, as I said in the beginning, right now we know the city is funding Zeb's salary, but what other resources from a budget standpoint do y'all really have to do any development?
And bottom line, Craven County, they are doing projects in New Bern without the city of New Bern knowledge of that program. So the programs shouldn't be put together. They was in my neighborhood. They didn't know my neighborhood was a flood area. So they'd be in repetitious, going to folks' houses and already have a grant. through North Carolina Housing Agency. So that's what,
Yeah.
I'm wondering about the cooperation that we have with Freeman County.
And that's where you all ultimately make a decision or give your executive director the authority to have those kind of conversations, to do some exploratory stuff to see what those resources are and how y'all can have a better collaborative. So maybe in the future, those resources can be managed through the Redevelopment Commission, and then there's a better coordination all the way around of how services are delivered in the community.
Richard, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For giving us this information, giving us encouragement, and insight on how to move forward. I really enjoy your presentation.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm here, like I say, weekly, so as I'm gonna step out, but as Zeb knows, anytime that we need to have some discussion around this issue, I'm happy to do it with you.
Thank you. Thank you for making
You
yourself
created more
available.
work.
And Zeb and Jamie are gonna give us some information of where we've been and where we're moving forward. And I have to say, I was remiss when I was given focus on thanking everybody for being here for 5 years. Miss Jamie Bullock has been on this commission. She served as a commissioner. She offered her legal advice often to us, so much so that she became our legal liaison with the city. And we really, really appreciate and could not do this without you, Jamie Bullock.
Thank you very much.
And we're welcoming Zeb, who brings so much doggone energy that I think you can feel it sometimes. So thank you, Zeb, for
Well, Madam Chairman of the Commission, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning. I want to piggyback a little bit on some of the comments that Mr. Varner shared and draw some finer distinctions. So first, I agree with Mr. Varner in as much as he's asked you some very probative questions about how you envision the commission at this stage and going forward. I think the first portions of the Redevelopment Commission's task were to figure out, okay, what's your boundary going to be? What should the plan look like? It was very preliminary and planning oriented. And now we transition to a phase where you have a plan, but we're focused at this point in implementation. So perhaps at this juncture you consider altering your strategies a bit. And I'm going to give you some nuggets to think about, and then Zeb is going to follow up with some additional comments. But in light of some of the things that Mr. Varner shared, I want you to appreciate and understand that in North Carolina, there are several different flavors of redevelopment commissions, okay? And depending on the flavor, that dictates what types of powers you have and what types of things you can do. So very often what you heard Mr. Varner talk about, at least from what I heard him say, was redevelopment commissions that were also housing authorities, which is one type of flavor of redevelopment commission in North Carolina. That is not what you are, okay? There are regional redevelopment commissions that have additional expanded opportunities because they're accessing resources from across regions. I think there was one example of a regional redevelopment commission in the northeastern part of the state. As a redevelopment commission, the way you are, not being a housing authority, not being a regional organization, we pare down some of those powers, but you always have the power to collaborate and partner with others. So the tone of my comments today are going to be about processes and partnerships. I think everybody in this room appreciates that we have limited resources. And we don't have an infinite pot of money. We don't have an infinite stock of land. And we don't have an infinite amount of time. So how do we maximize the resources we have and still accomplish our goals in a reasonable time frame? We can't do it all by ourselves. We have to work with other entities. I think several of the opportunities that Mr. Varner mentioned is where you can have a housing authority and a redevelopment commission using their expertise, their powers, and their access to accomplish very similar things. Mr. Dillahunt was talking about Craven County, which has already participated in giving you probably most of the lots that you have in your inventory. Craven County had handled that. There may be other opportunities for you to work more collaboratively with other local government entities. other partners such as Habitat for Humanity and nonprofit organizations, they may have the ability to do what you can't do easily. So for example, with the Housing Authority, they're already tapped into FEMA and lots of funding sources, both locally, statewide, and nationally. It may be more prudent in you furthering your housing aims to work with the Housing Authority instead of trying to use Commissioner Wallace's analogy, reinvent the wheel. So as you're looking at your goals and what you want to do, you may want to think about, we could try to get this thing off the ground and create something new, or is there someone in our local community, is there an entity who's reputable in our community that we can work alongside with to accomplish what we're trying to do? And this goes without saying, but our biggest partner at this juncture is the City of New Bern. We're in a city facility, city staff, so there may be subject matter experts at our fingertips or at our disposal within the city's resources that can help us mine information and move our projects forward. I think Jordan Hughes, the city engineer, had a large hand in helping you all with the Walt project. You want to be mindful of those resources that are free to you, that you can utilize in moving things forward. Also thinking about moving forward, we want to think about our processes. Very early on, especially when we didn't have robust staffing, there were a lot of things that we had to do in-house using our own individual commissioner resources. Now that you all have evolved and are getting closer to, I guess, what Reggie said, what do we want to be when we grow up, it may be a good time to look at those processes and say, how can we work more efficiently? Now that we have a full-time ZEB, are there things that we want to allocate to staff that perhaps worker project groups had to do before? And just thinking about how it is that from a public-facing perspective, thinking about our mission statement, how do we make our processes simple and easy for the public to understand? How do we inform the public about our processes? Is social media something that we need to utilize more often? Or is our website adequate? Those types of things may be something that you might want to bear in mind. And I want to shout out Commissioner Sarah for her diligent work with our rules of procedure. That goes a long way towards establishing and codifying what the Redevelopment Commission's processes and procedures are. And that's something that Deb is going to walk us through. But thinking about how do we make it easily understandable for people to buy property from the Commission? Because thinking about economic drivers and incentives, one of the easiest ways that we create economic activity in the redevelopment area is getting property out of the hands of the local government and back on the tax rolls. And you have the ability to do that through the processes that you set up. In the rules of procedure, there is a section on conflicts of interest. I just want to put this back in everybody's hearing. Zeb reminded us, and there's a form here, I think it's included in your binder. The form is titled Redevelopment Commission of City of New Bern Statement of Disclosure. Every year, you are being asked to renew your disclosure, identifying whether you own any property in the redevelopment area, whether you have an interest in any property, direct or indirect. Let me give you an example. If John Doe does not own property in the Redevelopment Commission, but John Doe leases a building in the Redevelopment Commission, that is an interest, okay? That's not to say you can't do it. You have to disclose it. And there's a statute that we've walked through in your training several times, and I'm not going to belabor the point you need, that walks through all the different types of interests you need to disclose. The form is very simple. I'm not aware of any direct or indirect interest, or if I have one, here's my interest. If you own a home and you live in it in the redevelopment area, that's fine, just disclose it. If you have any questions about should I disclose this or not, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. I think all of y'all have my contact information, and I'm happy to talk to you further about that. But before you leave today, if you have not already done so in the calendar year 2024, please make sure that you complete this form so that we can have it on file with the city clerk. If you have any questions about where the Redevelopment Commission boundaries are, I think there's a map in your materials, but if not, you can use Zeb or I, and we can help you walk through those steps if you need it. In closing, I want you all to, and this is something that Madam Chair has said, thinking about the Redevelopment Commission as an entity that sets the table for development. Okay? Making sure, because if development in the redevelopment area was otherwise attractive, you all wouldn't have a job. So how do we make this environment, make this area attractive for development, whether it's outside developers, whether it's empowering people who have traditionally been in the community to develop or redevelop, or whether you all take on the role as developers. How do we set the table, whether it's through infrastructure, whether it's through small-scale development projects, commercial or residential development projects, using the tools that we have in our arsenal so that we can get buy-in from other entities to help us in doing the things that we have been charged to do. So as you go through your conversation today, hopefully some of the things I said will be helpful in trying to chart a course for the future. I'm happy to entertain any questions you have.
You did say there was a map.
I think there may be a map in the CNI, but Mr. Director is saying that there are several maps available.
Yeah, there are several maps, including overlays of floodplains, outlines of parcels, the parcel interest owned there in sections, I believe, 2 and 4 of your binder. So I tried to tabulate those so that they would be easily located. Thank you, Madam Attorney. Any questions for her before I start? Go ahead, Kip.
One of the issues that we ran into very recently is title. Historically, titles are not very good down there because of the airing of properties along the way. And we ran into the situation with Mr. Diggs. We sold him 2 pieces of property and the title was bad on both of them. Correct?
I know title's bad on one. I can't. 209 Bryan Street, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I know that one, but I also heard that he bailed on 821 Bern because of.
According to the record, he withdrew
He forfeited his deposit.
from the West Street for economic reasons.
Okay, but regardless, title issues are going to become a continuous issue, and it plays into the thing about making the area attractive for developers. We as land consolidators, we take the role of being land consolidators, and we have to be able to show good title to the property that we own that we're trying to get developers interested in building in, and so forth like that. Now, how do we go through that process? For instance, and then I'll bring this up specifically, the parcel that we got on A Street from the county. Do we have any idea if the title's good?
I would tell you this, that generally, properties that are acquired by tax foreclosure, the foreclosure proceedings generally cure any title defects, provided that foreclosure process notifies everybody that's supposed to be notified. And the problem with Bryan Street was when the tax foreclosure attorney did that process, they missed an acre, okay? Which is a unique circumstance. It's not one that I've seen very commonly. You all have been acquiring property and disposing of property and recommending the disposal of property for several years now, and this is the first instance. I'm happy, if you would like to, and if I'm getting direction, to do a title search for the West A Street development properties to verify that you could, if you wanted to, give a general warranty deed. In your offer to purchase, you advertise to the world that if they want to buy property from the Redevelopment Commission, they are doing so by quick claim deed.
That's
wherein you make no warranties. And they understand that coming into the deal, which is very consistent with.
Do they?
Should.
Do they understand that?
They should understand that they're coming into the deal and you are not making any warranties, which is consistent with what the city of New Bern does and Craven County. But, and I hear you, if we're asking people to make significant financial investments on these lots, which very often causes the purchaser to want to get title insurance, there may be, especially if you're thinking about large commercial developers, there may be some utility in giving staff direction to look at particular properties. Now, do you want me to do a title search on every single 4,000 square, $4,000 lot in Duffield that you own? Perhaps not. But if there are specific areas of interest, I'm happy to take that direction.
Yeah, and I guess my main concern is the properties that we're getting from Craven County and the city, those 10 lots that we got, like this, I mean, we've been talking about the 2 lots across from the Eubanks house. We have, and everybody wants to build on them. Or the title is any good, then we're gonna have those issues.
I will tell you that the city and county have been donating lots to Habitat for Humanity for a very long time. And I don't, in my personal knowledge and having access to city files going back to like 1999, I've not seen an issue where Habitat was unable to get funding or to sell their house that they built on from the city and county because of the title defect that they got through foreclosure. So I say that to say it's not an impossible circumstance that you're talking about, because obviously so with 209 Bryan Street, but it is the exception, not the rule.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I need some clarification on the matter as it relates to Charles Diggs. So since the last time we saw Charles Diggs, he has withdrawn.
No, sir. So he made offers to purchase on 2 different properties. Okay? And there was one property, I think it was on West Street, that he forfeited his deposit. He said, I'm not going to go forward with the purchase of the property on West Street. With 209 Bryan Street,
Right.
he came back to you at the last meeting and made a request. You all took some action, and I think it is on the agenda today to review and reconsider that action.
Okay, I have, if I may, and I don't know if this falls out of line, but if we cannot seal the deal, or if we don't finish the deal with Mr. Diggs, he can still withdraw from the Bryan Street deal also, correct?
Yes, sir.
What effect is that going to have on us as it relates to future endeavors with the county and with them being in partnership with us to convey land as, I don't know if convey is the right word,
Yes, sir.
as they have in the past? Are they still going to show us that kind of good faith, respect, and effort if we cannot keep Mr. Diggs?
I will say this, so the Diggs properties, for lack of a better term, was a part of 9 parcels that you all selected to request from the city and county. And the city and county gave you those 10 parcels with the expectation that they would be put back on the tax rolls in some meaningful way in a reasonable amount of time. I think that still holds true, and I'm going to defer to Zeb because he has more frequent conversations with city staff on, executive city staff on these particular topics. But I think from everything that I've seen, the city and county are very much invested in the Redevelopment Commission trying to generate some economic revitalization in that area. So whether it's Mr. Diggs or someone else, so long as those properties can be utilized for development in a reasonable amount of time, I don't think the county or city care who gets it necessarily,
Right.
so long as their utilization of the product of that property is consistent with the redevelopment plan.
My fear is that if we don't seal the deal, whether it be with Mr. Diggs or anybody else, with the land that's been conveyed by the county, that we're on the course of shooting ourselves in the foot for future efforts. And I hope I'm wrong about that.
Well, Rob, you gotta remember, you're not shooting yourself in the foot if you got policies out there. You got policies and procedures. This is what we operate under. Then if the county comes and say, why did they do this? This is the procedure. It didn't fall under that. It didn't go through. Catch now is, do you change the procedure to make it easier for them to get the property?
I'll say this, Mr. Commissioner Morgan, if the local government was to come back and review the Redevelopment Commission in 5 years, and the commission still has all 10 of those lots in your inventory, I could see how those government officials would scratch their heads and say, what are you doing?
Right, yeah.
Whether it's Mr. Diggs or some other individual. I think from you all's standpoint, whether not necessarily specific to the property located at 209 Bryan Street, for your entire inventory, what can we do to package these lots in a way that is attractive to development, whether it's from development outside the commission or development that you all decide to take on, and how can we do that sooner rather than later?
So is now the time to revisit and to maybe restructure some of those to save and get
It's
it
on the
down the
agenda
line?
later on. We're gonna deal with it.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I'll say, Commissioner Morgan, there is an appendix to the rules of procedure about the policies and procedures for selling property owned by the Redevelopment Commission. And the proposal that has been reviewed slims down that process quite a bit, streamlines it, and makes it a shorter process to complete.
And that's why I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself when I was asking.
So
But thank you, though.
you have a crystal ball and you're seeing where we're going.
No.
And if I could just add an addendum to what our attorney has said. Simply put, it's about relationships, and I believe what our local officials are looking for from this commission is effectiveness. Are we mission effective? And so, in every decision that we make, we have to come back to our role and our mission, which I'm so thankful to the chairperson for bringing us back to mission this morning. And are we being effective in our mission? Our mission is, as was said during Mr. Barner's presentation, our mission is not necessarily to build houses, but our mission is to make sure that we're setting the table for development in the redevelopment zone.
I saw a hand from either Kip or Steve, yes.
One of the things I thought I gathered from the follow-up we had on Mr. Digg, kind of jumping back to those properties real fast. At a certain time frame of those properties being held, is the title clean then? Because I thought I heard something about a 5-year window or 7-year window or.
So without speaking to Mr. Diggs' attorney, here's what I understand. That Mr. Diggs would be making a claim for adverse possession. And in North Carolina, there are two theories by which somebody can claim property under adverse possession. One is color title. So he can, in that time period, is 7 years. City county had it for 5 years. He would need 2 more years to get to the magic number. He did tell us when that time frame was going to be, but that's the theory that he's using to be able to make a claim to clear up the title defect that his attorney has identified.
So from the construct of the guidance that you may need of what our wishes could possibly be, if the city or city and county have owned something for a 7-year window, that changes the process that we wanted to ensure that we had clean title, right?
That certainly could impact the process, yes, sir.
If it's a tax foreclosure.
Correct. Well, if it's
Yeah, but there's a regular foreclosure doesn't do a whole lot for clearing title.
I don't know that the city forecloses on property otherwise,
Other
other than tax
taxes.
foreclosures. Every now and again, you get a gift where somebody gives property to the commission. In my experience, the city will only accept property from somebody if they give it by warranty deed. So if we then subsequently convey the property and the person says, hey, this title is mucked, they can go back to the individual, the entity that conveyed the property to the city to advance the warranties a little bit. Yes, sir.
I'm a novice, so maybe this is a weird question, but is there any way in our processes that we can maybe put a process in place that before we have those conversations to finalize the title or sale or this and that we actually research the title so we go in there knowing if the title's good or not?
I will tell you this. Title searches can be time-consuming and expensive, especially in an area where very often properties are inherited and people inherit those properties without rules. And there can be very intricate or complex family dynamics when you're thinking about who inherited what.
Yeah.
Kip is laughing. I work real hard on that language. So I would advise against this commission taking on the burden of doing the buyer's due diligence for them.
So that's a buyer's responsibility. Always has it.
Buyer responsibility. You want to take the property, we say in all of our documentation, you're taking it as is, the burden is on that buyer to say, do I want to go forward with this deal?
Understood. Okay.
And generally, you're conveying property by upset bid process. So any subsequent bidder also carries that responsibility to figure out if this is what you really want. And they can say, once they get the property, they can sell it to somebody else with your conditions. You do not have to take on that responsibility unless you absolutely want to, and I would advise against it. Yes, sir.
You just about answered my question. But if I decided to buy that property without a clear title or without being able to get title insurance, the bill on it, that'll be my gamble.
Yes, sir. That can be your gamble. But here's the thing that you always have to keep in the back of your mind, okay? Because In the private development world, too bad, so sad, we don't care. But given what you all have been tasked to do, if nobody, in the case of Mr. Diggs, if an issue has been identified that makes a lot that's located in a redevelopment zone even less attractive for development, who is going to remedy that issue such that that land just doesn't lie vacant and dead and continues to be a blight in the community? Redevelopment commissions exist to help eliminate blight, not necessarily to be pure profit centers. So when we're thinking about these types of lots, it's good to look at it from a developmental standpoint, but it's also very important to look at it from a fundamental standpoint, applying your values and the statutory policy that's been articulated by the legislature about wanting to eliminate or reduce blight. Was that helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The question I'm really answering, you got a piece of property,
Yes, sir.
a cloud is on the title, can't get title insurance. Everybody don't need title insurance if the building on the property cash. So after the 7 years, let go to that person by adverse possession of the title of the property or the house forever. I'm gonna build a house on the property.
I got you. I understand your question. So I'm trying not to give you a lawyer answer. An adverse possession claim is effective when you make it. Okay? So if you satisfy all the requirements, but never claim, hey, I'm going to court, adverse possession, I meet all the elements and get a judgment, you're still in a quicksand. But to your point, if somebody doesn't care to advance the claim, we're in the same position that we were.
You still have to make the claim, so at 7 years you have to file with the court, and that can take a while to get the claim to the court.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to some of our successes. I gave you a lot more information than I'm going to cover in your packet, but I want to just review. In 2023, the RDC worked to complete the 911 Eubanks property. It is complete, and now we are looking for a way to finish the project by making sure that we accomplish the national goal of getting a low to moderate income family in that by some mechanism. We are in the process of working with strategic partners to cluster develop around the property to raise the standard of housing in that specific neighborhood. And work continues on that initiative. Also, we work to realize the health and wellness clinic. And over the last year, that project has morphed and it has shifted and it has presented lots and lots of opportunity for conversation and lots of opportunity for opportunity. I'm really optimistic about the future of that project, and I want to thank publicly Commissioner Tabari Wallace for his zeal in pursuing that along with others around the table. And especially for the upcoming community meetings, as we have concerned citizens who are asking us for an update. And so Mr. Wallace has been proactive in working with Ms. Bryan to make sure that we're being out in the community to talk to stakeholders to give accurate information and to keep everybody updated as to where we are in the project. I, on the staff side, have been working weekly. Jamie knows all the things to make sure that our potential community partners have agreements and we're working through all the things, and we should have a report on that relatively soon, I would imagine. And then also we started the initiative to build 3 affordable houses in Walt Bellamy, thanks to the generosity of the City of New Bern and Alderman Bobby Astor. His ARPA appropriation, the RDC engaged IMEC builders and are nearing completion of construction These homes will be used to house low to moderate income families in need of affordable housing solutions, and we're currently engaged as a commission with several very interested parties in purchasing these homes. Those parties range from other public organizations that are interested in buying them from us and renting them out, to individuals who have engaged and called our offices for tours and those kinds of things. So I'm very optimistic that once they're available for sale, we will be able to move forward quite quickly with that deal to close it out and start another one.
Because yesterday when we were on site, we talked about moving forward with the appraisal process for the properties. Because they're at the place where we can have an appraiser come in and give us a market value for them.
Yeah, Monday morning, our
Monday morning?
appraiser
Okay.
will be there.
To Reggie's point, do we know where the money goes?
Yes,
That's a point he brought up.
yeah.
Very.
Excellent point.
On record, the proceeds from these sales will go to the fund to the fund balance of the Redevelopment Commission.
Okay.
And so I did want to include for the record just pictures of the progress of this project. And so if you look about midway through your section 1 in your agenda, you'll see a very colorful page of pictures that show everything from our shovel turn that a lot of us went to some of the interior setting of the cabinets, to the framing, all the way to when the siding started just about a week ago. So the project is moving along quite well, and we're really, really happy with it, and we look forward. In the words of our city engineer, we want to use it, rinse it, and repeat, because this is a process that works, and we're going to build affordable and attainable housing stock in New Bern.
They're in the place of completing interior finishes now.
Yeah,
Doing the
absolutely.
painting, putting down the flooring, that's why we can go ahead and get them appraised.
Actually painting this one.
Yeah, they look great.
Yeah. So all growth depends upon activity. There is no development physically or intellectually without effort, and effort means work. Work is not a curse, it is a prerogative of intelligence, the only means of manhood and the measure of civilization. That's Calvin Coolidge. And so I want to commend this commission on the work that you have to your backs and the work that you have to your fronts. I also want to just remark that the RDC supported the removal of over 200 vehicles from the redevelopment zones that were abandoned or not in accordance with zoning. Prior to our activity, that was all complaint driven, and so that number was much, much less. With our support and advocacy and partnership with the city of New Bern, we're cleaning up the neighborhoods that we're working in little by little. Also, I want to remark that the RDC, for the first time in its history, in 2023, closed on two parcels of land that were previously owned by the RDC, netting around $6,000 to your fund balance. So, to Mr. Barner's point, we've added to the fund balance. Even if it's just by $6,000, $6,000 is better than zero. So good job on the work that we have done, and I'm optimistic about the work that we have yet to come. In order to safeguard our time, that's the conclusion of my report, unless you all have questions.
And I will say this, in closing, I think, our joint presentation. If you have thoughts or questions, please reach out to staff.
Please.
Zeb's contact information is indicated on that contact form in the back. I think most of you have my contact information, but if you don't, my law office is located at 209 Pollock Street. I'm there all the time. If you can't find me there, you can always get me on my cell phone, which is 252-671-7808. It's on our website. It's public anyway. So if you have any questions or thoughts, or if as you're going through these materials, please reach out. As you're reflecting on these conversations, please give him Zeb so that he can get your collective thinking and help move you guys forward.
One question there.
Sure.
The money from abating these cars, what happened to that fund?
The abatement enforcement is actually done by our ordinance officials, and so that would be a city function. So the funds would go back to the city to support further enforcement. And I will say that the city currently has two staff doing this job, and so they need support as well, so that they have more of a force working to that effort, because I call them almost every day and say, hey, can you go here? Can you go here? And they're always very, very responsive to our calls.
Reason for asking that, a vehicle normally sells between $500 and $600, so I was thinking, would that money, or could that money come back to the redevelopment committee?
I don't think our abatement officers are selling the property, or selling the vehicles.
Well,
If
no.
anything, they have been towed
Yeah.
at the
it's just-
owner's expense.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. That was a very fast overview.
I tried.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We do. Because now I think we do have some business we'd like to talk about, and the considerations they're listed in your agenda. And the first one, as Commissioner Morgan had brought up, was the review of the Digg's request to purchase. I'm going to turn that over to you, Commissioner Perryboy, to kind of summarize that.
Oh, okay.
Wake up, man.
Yeah.
You look like in a daze.
Well, I didn't know that I was on the agenda. At our last meeting, Mr. Digg made a presentation to us, and we just had a conversation about the title issue and so forth like that. And his request was to remove only the time limit on when he had to start construction. We discussed that and and it's in the minutes that you have in your thing that were really accurate. And we ended up extending the time limit from 1 year to 4 years, which allowed him the time that his attorney projected that it would take to get the plow off of the title. So evidently Mr. Diggs was, and understandably, had some concerns about spending that much money to legal fees to clear title, and might not work, and so then he would be out. So the issue becomes for revisiting, do we want to go along with Mr. Diggs' initial request and remove the time limit on the building of a home on that lot? If the title cannot get cleared, you know, it is not ours anymore, like you say, and we don't have to pay for mowing it and everything else for infinity, because that's what's going to happen. It's going to have a cloud on the title, and it's going to take a long time or a lot of money to get it cleared off so that we can sell it to somebody to build a lot, the house on it.
And to Robbie's point, if Mr. Diggs is the owner, and we lift this time frame and he does not, he goes forward with the purchase, is that still an option that he not go forward? Did he forfeit like he did the other property, or is he already beyond that point?
Mr. Diggs is ready to close.
Okay.
And so basically what he has indicated to staff is as soon as the time restriction is lifted, he will close immediately. That means ownership of that parcel will go from this commission. In other words, the responsibility for that parcel, the mowing of that parcel, the tax whatever for that parcel will transfer, and the insurance from that parcel will transfer from us, from public funds, because we are a public body, to a private citizen who will then own that parcel almost immediately. He will be responsible for the upkeep of that parcel. He will pay taxes on that parcel, and he will work to insure that parcel. So that is what we are discussing today.
Right, and that was my point. So the city and the county would receive taxes from a citizen that they're not now. So to your point, Robbie, that they would feel like we're moving forward with our plan, and they're seeing the benefit of getting taxes.
Right.
They really don't care if someone builds a house there, they just want to get the taxes.
Right.
And an important part that I think Madam Chair alluded to earlier, excuse me, Mr. Pericle, because I don't want to interrupt your presentation.
Very good, by the way.
But the resolution that has been included in your packet, as well as the restrictive covenants that have been included in the deed, do contain restrictions that any residential dwelling that is established on that lot would have to be occupied by either the owner or persons of low to moderate income. So there still are some enforcement mechanisms in the deed to help you accomplish what I think you set out to accomplish.
And that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
That all being said, it's appropriate that we make a motion to remove the time limit on the deed to Mr. Diggs and retain all the other restrictions that we have in the sale contract.
And if someone is inclined to make that motion, there is a resolution in your package that evidences just what Mr. Faribault set out. So your motion may be captioned as a motion to approve the resolution regarding 209 Bryan Street.
I make that motion.
We have a motion, second, and a second. Can we, voice?
Yes, ma'am.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. All in favor, say
No,
aye.
discussion.
Oh, sorry, discussion. You have something?
I was just gonna, sorry, I wasn't, I was trying to see where you were going, if you're gonna get all the way to the vote point. The request to me is logical. I can understand why you made the appeal to start with. The concern I have with us revisiting right now is, are we setting a precedent for any time we make a decision that someone doesn't like, that's gonna be reopened? Because none of the facts or circumstances have changed, everything's in front of us just like it was, and now we're revisiting. That's not a reason not to do anything, but I want to just be careful of the precedent that we're setting, that every time anybody comes in front of us or we do
Anybody
anybody,
may, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just do want to make it clear for the record, Mr. Diggs did not ask us as a commission to revisit this issue. This commission, as last meeting's minutes were reviewed, Commissioner Paraguay actually requested this item be put back on the agenda for reconsideration. So as we reviewed it, the commission actually said, we'd like to reconsider and review this action. And not just Mr. Paraguay, but a majority of the commission actually asked to review this. And so I think whenever that happens, the precedent ought to be set that whenever the commission has made an action that needs to be reviewed, that we put it back on the agenda to do that. I don't think, however, and I see your hand, I don't think, however, that whenever a citizen complains about what we do, that's the precedent we're setting here at all. Because I want to make it very, very clear for the record that Mr. Diggs did not come back for a fourth time since 2022 and ask us to reconsider his request.
okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Just as a point, I didn't know that Commissioner Perigoy had requested that it be put back as a consideration, but what I did, because I was not present at the original presentation of Mr. Diggs, and I was there for his last presentation, I went back and I reviewed, and that's why I had those questions, was because I did not have a clear understanding at the time that he was there last. And so that was why I asked those questions, because I needed clarification to make sure. So I am glad that you made that brought this to the commission for consideration. Thank you.
The only thing that I'll add to this is all this process is clouded in my mind. Our role is it to get property on the tax roll. Is that our objective, regardless of what may happen?
Right.
Because we're facing that now with city and city-county owned properties. There's no review, no restrictions on property use at all. So all they're interested in is getting money, the properties back on the tax roll. Now, is that what does that also come to us, whereas some of our overriding goals in our redevelopment plan is for housing and neighborhood elimination of blight and so forth like that, but we seem to be leaning towards a priority of, hell, just get it on the tax roll. That's all the city wants us to do.
I'll speak first to that question, and if I neglect any part of a complete answer, you will back me up, Jamie.
I would say words.
All right. What I would say is exactly what you said. Only I would define it a little bit more nuanced. Our role as a redevelopment commission, statutorily, is to reduce or decrease blight in the redevelopment zone. What I will also say as a nuance is that a vacant lot that is upkept by a private citizen and well manicured is not blight. So, in fact, getting land on the tax roll held by a private citizen that is invested in the neighborhood, you have done your job of decreasing blight. Do we have the priority of increasing housing stock? Yes. Goal number 2 in the redevelopment plan clearly states that. Is that the only thing that we're doing? I don't think so. As has already been said around this table this morning, our job is much, much bigger. It is community development, it is community engagement, it is access, and it is beautification in the redevelopment plan. Our job is to make sure that these parcels of land are productive parcels of land for the community and decrease blight. And so a vacant lot is not blight in and of itself. A vacant lot that's taking up public funds to keep beautiful, that might be considered blight. So that's what I'll say. Anything to add?
And I feel like that has been our mission since the beginning, is we are I mean, don't want to overdo it, but we're kind of the moral compass of the development area of trying to meet community goals of providing good quality housing, providing neighborhood improvement, and bringing commercial development as well as health and wellness entities. It's not just a health and wellness center, but it's improving the neighborhood, improves everybody's mental health, I do believe. I think we all think that. That's why we're on this commission, because as Reggie said, entities like the state, city, and county, and like Kip said, they want the tax money. The banks that are given the great money for all this development, they are not doing it, they do not care who lives in those houses. They're doing it because it's a money maker. So we're the entity that's trying to make it matter to our community because we live here in Newton. So that's a balance beam. We are walking and have walked for 5 years, and that's why we, I think, are accused of not seeing the action that some entities want us to see, mainly the city, because we have a value system that we're trying to implement when we're making these decisions.
Yeah, and when we sell a lot, we have the ability to make recommendations about restrictions, about junk cars and all the other stuff that we're trying to eliminate. That's part of the blighting of the community. And seems that we've gotten crosswise with the city's objective of just getting money on the tax rolls. Because when they took over our review of sales of properties and eliminated in all purposes the ability to control what happens on that piece of property, we're getting a little crosswired.
And perhaps what you do in thinking about processes is perhaps you request for the Board of Aldermen to give you that oversight ability again. Now, I will say that when a process takes 6, 9, 12 months to complete, I don't think our public officials would be very inclined to turn over oversight when it takes so long for citizens to participate in the process. However, once you review your processes and procedures and get things streamlined and very clear and simple for people to understand and participate and show that people can complete it in a reasonable amount of time, then perhaps there might be some appetite to revisit that decision.
Okay. I think too, putting the restrictions on it, Zeb, I think it was you and I that had this conversation. I think we need to have a broader conversation on whether it's prudent for every piece of property to put the low income tag, because I think you want to bring a mixed group of people and incomes and whatever to the area. So I'm not sure that it makes sense to tag every property with you have to be low income. Because by the way, who's policing that long term and all of the above? But that, we want to build we don't want it to just be, high income people come move in to be close to the river. That's not what we sort of want to protect and preserve the area and what it's been historically. But is that the best way to get there? I think I think it was you and that.
Yeah, absolutely was. Diversity in every way,
Yeah.
data has shown is by far the best way to develop long-term
Yeah.
sustainable communities.
And I love the conversations we're having because this is our strategic planning session, but we do have the motion and the second on the table. So are there any other concerns about, and to summarize it, it's removing the time restriction from Mr. Diggs.
That's correct.
And that would make the property his, he would close on it, and from his presentation, he plans to build, but he does not know if the time frame will allow him to pay all the legal expenses and build in the time frame.
Correct.
Okay.
Just want to get something straight real quick. This resolution came from Kip. He initiated it.
Yeah. Does that change how you feel about it?
I thought it was Robbie. I'm sorry. Lord, that person came from Kip.
Well, it's obviously
Wow.
what Zeb said, it was a concern that commissioners had after our meeting was over. We can't do everything in an hour and a half. We tried to get out of there in an hour, and it sounded good at the time, and everybody said, yeah, we'll give you some more time. And then we thought, well, maybe that's not enough. So, that's where we are.
Are you calling for a roll call or a voice vote?
Voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And resolution carries. Moving forward. The next thing we're talking about is something that I kind of intimated when we're switching. I feel like we just have come to a different place in how we get work done and where we get work done. We talked about our mission, our 5 guiding principles were really for us to create our mission statement and the redevelopment areas. We've got that. So I think, and I'm adding into this, I think we should start our meetings with our mission statement now. And what I really want to say is maybe we ought to also look at our work groups, because our work groups were based on those 3 areas of our mission statement, health and wellness, improving the neighborhood, and providing housing. And all of that's under the umbrella of blight, of reducing blight, working with blight. And I feel like we're going to have, maybe it's just listening to Reggie this morning and being kind of excited about projects, seeing the Walt Bellamy projects come to fruition. I feel like we might be moving into a place where we need teams of people that are just going to take on a situation, handle it, report to us, we ask them questions, and then they're done. And I feel like our proposed, whatever, what you're doing, Sarah, what's it called, the procedures, is paring down a lot of what, like we were doing on the housing work group, was trying to decide if this was meeting our goals, and that's why we would have separate meetings. Let me back up in history. When we started on the commission, those of you who've been on here since inception, do you remember the first year and a half we met every 2 weeks? Because that's how much time it takes to get something done. And everybody said, this is taking too much time. So we started work groups, and then your work groups met at a better place and time than coming here every night, whatever worked for you. And then people have come off the commission, come back on the commission, and there's been confusion of where do I fit in a work group. So I feel like if we address projects head on with somebody who has maybe the expertise in that subject matter, and experience, and, you know,
Some history of the.
history in the area, experience with city officials, experience with whatever that particular project is. And I'd like to move to that kind of working session, because there's not enough time for us to get anything done if we meet once a month for an hour and a half. What I would like our meetings to be is hearing what the work groups or the project teams, I'd like to use the word team. The teams of people are doing, they report to us, we have questions to them every time. I say, I really want to do that too. How can I join your team? You know, there's no rules that you can only be on one team or another team, but that's how we're going to get people who have the expertise and the experience to work together, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I don't have a perfect plan, like, so right now, let's raise your hand, which one do you want to be on? Because I feel like we're going to talk about some other projects, and it, you know, I'm an architect, I still like doing the building part of the project, but I also know a lot of city officials because I'm an architect, and I've been in the inspections office and other, you know, before the alderman, all kinds of things. So I think a lot of people have different skill sets they can bring.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to point out the memo attached to this cover sheet does go into a little bit of detail about the difference between historical working groups, procedurally, how they work, and the new proposed project teams as ad hoc groups brought together specifically to undertake a specific project within the redevelopment zone. These groups are generally interdisciplinary, thus allowing the group to achieve holistic and shared goals. We want to say experience paired with expertise yields effective outcomes. That's what we want to be as a commission. And so there's a procedural rundown in that memo as well. And so I believe that is what you are asking for a motion on, to switch to project teams instead of working groups. Is that correct?
That is correct. Good summary there. I feel like I was kind of all over the place.
I would like to add, Madam Chair, that in the proposed rules of procedure, page 12 of 14, there is a rule that's proposed further codifying what project groups, what project teams, could look like. When you're thinking about the open meetings law, because you are a public body, you don't want more than 4 people on a team at any given moment, and that the group would terminate upon the completion of a project. So whereas working groups were standing, these would be very action specifically targeted groups to complete projects.
I do agree with Madam Chairperson wholeheartedly. Maybe I do have a crystal ball in front of me, which you will hear about later. But my question is, if you do have the 14-member group, would they be able to say, okay, now we need all hands on deck for a specific project, and it contained the whole commission?
I think, and Madam Chair, please correct me if I'm wrong, the idea of the project group is for those individuals in that group to work on advancing those projects between meetings. Mm-hmm. And then at the regular meeting, or whenever you all get together as a whole, you would report back and get everybody's input and buy-in. And if there were times where the whole group needed to take action, you would have that opportunity during the regular meetings.
I love it. Thank you.
Correct. And you know, because we can do things as an entire commission. I mean, work on a project together, but this is to help get the work done in between our meetings.
They do the homework for us.
Okay.
Do the homework. Yeah. Do the homework, do the legwork.
And then come back.
Bring it back. And see what, and then you might say, well, we need I need your legal counsel, Jamie. I don't know what I'm doing here. You know, we could do that outside of our commission meeting, because as you've reminded us, and I appreciate it, all of our emails to each other are public information as well.
Your emails to one another concerning commission business or public records.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said smoke signal.
Just as an example of success for project groups, I want to say out loud, the project group that brought together and made today happen was led by Commissioner Julius Parham, and we want to say thank you to to you for your diligent work with staff and the project group for the rules and procedures. To get that drafted into us was led by Sarah Proctor, and we want to congratulate and thank you for the hard work and that.
They use the word time-bound goals because it took me so long. Just I love that. I'm like, ugh, I was a little bit behind.
But after today, there will no longer be a strategic planning project team, because we had our strategic planning session, and the ROP, the rules and procedures will have been recommended to the commission. So that's how they'll work in practicality, and we've already seen them work. So I believe, Madam Chairperson, you are looking for a motion right now?
I am looking for a motion to, and I believe to go with the policies and procedures that we have drafted, that we would have project teams rather than standing work groups.
Yes, ma'am, I think the language you're looking for is a motion to abolish the existing working groups and transition to project groups.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and more discussion on the issue.
I do have a question. Will I still be able to make a report today on the neighborhood, because it won't be a neighborhood working group, but still share with what has taken place and with the direction that the neighborhood should go?
Yes, sir, under agenda item number 8.
Thank you.
Or I could make a motion to accept that after you make your speech.
It ain't a speech, it'll be very short, but however you all want to handle it.
I do have one question, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Would it be permissible to work on more than one group? Or
That's a good question. That's a good question, Commissioner Dillahunt. And the question was, can you work on more than one group? And I would say I don't see why you wouldn't be able to.
No.
I mean, it's not,
If your time permits,
if your time permits, you know,
that everyone should probably serve on at least one.
excellent. Everyone
Good
should
distinction.
serve on one,
Coming down the line.
at least
Okay.
one.
Okay. Motion on the floor.
Understood?
Motion on the floor?
Second.
If that's all the conversation, then I'll do a voice vote to abolish the working groups and move forward with the project groups. And I still like the word team, so I'm going to use it, even though it's not written that way. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Well, that motion carries too, so we'll move forward with the new structure there. Which leads us, that's a good segue, into the adoption of the rules of procedure that Sarah Proctor has been working on. So I'm going to let you kind of overview that for the commission, if you don't mind.
I figured that was coming.
Yeah.
So I figured in my car this morning. So when we first talked about these several months ago, I think our main concern was they're kind of long. We're worried about a foot fault. So when our group met, Kip, Sharon, and I, and Zeb, we just talked about, we had all sort of read them a lot more closely, and we were like, well, they really set out sort of exactly what that does. There's a big section in the middle about, the chairperson's role in the debate and how our meetings go. So even though they do seem sort of long and perhaps daunting, because what if we mess something up, I really think they're intended to, set out what we already do and clarify some other, areas that may not have been in writing. So I didn't make that many changes. I rearranged some things because that's how my brain works, but really it's pretty close to the original. The few things I'll note is I still had sort of blanks on Rule 8 items that, page 5 of 14. Rule 8, there's certain things that require a roll call vote. And I think we'll still look to Jamie sometimes for what, should we do a roll call on this? Because some things just seem to, rise to the level. So that's what number 3 is for. Number 2 is about the expenditures, and I don't know, Zeb or Jamie, maybe you guys have more thoughts, but this used to say $1,000, and I think we sort of went away with that because we pretty much what we do, follows our budget that's approved by the Board of Aldermen anyway, because we're part of their budget. So I don't even know if we need to fill this in or what we need to fill it in with, but that's just, I don't think we want to approve these with blanks, so.
What was that, Ms. Parker?
Sorry, page 5 of 14, Rule 8.
8F, number 2.
Okay.
It's just talking about a roll call vote to approve an expenditure not included in our budget or in excess of blank dollars or blank percent above the budgeted amount. So in other words, I think our budget allows for 10% or does it not?
I'll tell you this, so back in the day, before the commission had a robust budget, there were lots of times where the commission would receive expenses. Those were not specifically itemized in the budget, and they needed to actually need to be taken, and it was a memorable experience for those of us who were still here. So I think that item is included in the event that an expenditure comes up that was not accounted for in the budgeting process. So it is a super duper fail-safe that you may determine is not needed, but it's included based on the very memorable experience that we had before we had a robust budget.
I believe if memory serves me correctly, also, or past action of this commission, you delegated up to $1,000 of expenditure to be able to be made by the staff without having to come to the board. Easy application of that. Had that rule not been in there, you all would not have food today, because I would have had to come to you with a quote of how much the food costs to get your permission to spend the fund, the whatever, to give food to you all. So that in my view just gives a clear guideline to what you all are willing to delegate and entrust to the staff person to use common sense outside the itemized budget.
But I do agree that if we're going to publish these and make these our standing rules, we need to have either strike that from
I was going to say, do we need a roll call? You tell me, do we need a roll call for a larger expenditure? If we don't need a roll call, take it out of the mandatory roll call and we'll handle it as it comes.
And that's entirely for you all to decide.
Would it be prudent, like from a public?
From a public standpoint, if you're talking about expending money,
Yeah.
it may be good to have a very clear record of where everyone stood as far as the vote.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's
So then we should fill in numbers in there to make it
a number of percentages.
Like you
Yes,
said, like
or I wasn't thinking
1,000 or 10%. It just comes to mind. But
Percent makes more sense to me, because what if our budget is a construction project? That-
Right.
Or buying Chik Fil A, like there could be a very big, like $1,000 is, if it's a huge construction project, it may make sense for it to be $2,000. So percent makes more sense to me, but 10% above budgeted amount, is
that makes sense to me. 10% on a construction project or a large project is, anything above 10% is, 10% is getting in the significant range. So.
yeah, and if it's too big, maybe it's smaller, maybe it's 5 or 7, but that's
Thoughts on this side of the table? Money man? Sit beside me?
Are we talking about project budgets or the commission budget? I mean, the commission budget that we approved was $50,000. So, I mean, we're not,
So
but the project budgets are, somewhat a different ball of wax altogether.
Yeah.
So
Expenditures would come under project budgets. So, for instance, when I meet with, yesterday, we toured the Walt Bellamy sites, and the site manager had a question of, do we go with locking roof accesses that cost approximately $48 more than a non-locking mechanism? That's not something you guys want me to make the site manager wait a month so I can come and ask you all. And so because it was $48, I said, please go ahead and do what you normally do.
But within that project budget that we approved, we added 10% extra contingency in it.
Yeah.
So you're still within.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a big difference.
So to your point, if expenditures come with projects, you all may elect to do that per project instead of having a standard percentage. So we may opt to strike that.
Or it's just two different things. It might be as a flat, all expenses under $1,000, and then as a agreed upon percentage of a project budget. Because there's two different expenditures, in my opinion, there.
Or you did put the annual commission budget.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the first part is approval of an expenditure not included in the commission's budget. So that's something outside of what, like outside of the 1,000 we already give you for whatever, and outside of the 10%. So that's the, so maybe we're talking about striking the second half. Is that what we're thinking? Because we kind of already.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and so as a project comes up, we can make that determination at each project, if this is going to be over 10%.
And if we find it's not working, and Zeb's feeling like he's having to come back to us all the time, we can just amend this section. It's hard to foresee everything that's going to happen. So maybe we just strike everything after or and leave the first part, and then if that is not working, we can revisit in a few months or whatever.
Okay.
Okay.
And then Beth, on 9, I added this language that, and then I thought about it as I was reading it this morning, is this too strict? The presiding officer will restate the initial motion, and after a second's been obtained, open the floor to debate. If no seconds obtained, the motion fails. I added that because this is literally just talking about our process of debate. But then I said, is shall restate too strict? Like what if, again, foot fault thinking, like what if that doesn't exactly restate it? So is that
Right.
something? We can come up with like fluffier language there or something if we, that was just one
I would say should, because very often in my observations, there's robust discussion. Sometimes between the motion and the second, and sometimes after the second, and people may not have remembered what the original motion was. So it's always a good practice to restate if at all possible. And so instead of shall, perhaps should.
Okay, then just pointing out, because this is something I didn't know was a thing, so 10A on page 6, it says a commissioner, I'm just reading the last sentence. A commissioner who has withdrawn from a meeting without being excused by a majority vote shall be counted as present for purposes of determining a quorum. And then later on, it says, page 9 of 14 on Rule 13, that basically we have a duty to vote. You know, you can't just sit out for a reason that's not a conflict of interest. So the last sentence of 13 says, if we've withdrawn without being excused by a majority vote, our vote is recorded as an affirmative vote. So I don't necessarily have a problem with those. They're just, I didn't know those were a thing, so I think we need to keep those in mind going forward. And if, I don't know where those came from. Is that like a standard public body thing?
It is. It's consistent with the rules of procedure for the city of New Bern, which is an extrapolation of Robert's rules.
Yeah, and I don't have an issue with it, but that's just know if you are not excused, you're going to be an affirmative vote for everything. So let's make sure we're here and voting, or excused ahead of time. Just pointing it out because it is interesting.
That is.
Yeah.
That was an unknown
Yeah.
rule for me.
Motion 8C on page 9, Beth, is this. So it says any amendment to a proposed resolution shall be reduced to writing, and then I added some language there and reread before the vote. And I guess my issue was with, I think the original language said reduced to writing, and I was thinking, how's all this going to happen during the meeting? So we're talking about to a written resolution that Jamie's already prepared before the meeting. I think you've typically scribbled them down because you're the one that goes back and actually makes the changes. But is that to just basically let's make sure how that process works is drafted correctly, because I don't want to again. And I swear there's not many more.
Well, you would highlight it on page 12, you would yell it in.
What was that?
On page 12, a copy that I got had a lot of yellow there.
Oh, yeah, those were addressed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those were addressed. The language was changed and it makes sense. They were just questions I asked for Jamie or Zeb or somebody or Beth to like add language because I don't actually know the process and they
So
did.
you're asking, so the proposed resolution needs to be
Yeah,
written and read before it's voted on?
yeah, and I'm just wondering, like I said by the presiding officer, because we just need to figure out this process and reread before the commission, but is that, I think it's been Jamie that's historically done that, so can we just say, what do we say there?
So historically, if there's an amendment to a resolution, let's just say there's a resolution to sell property, you want to change a restricted covenant to add or increase months or something, you'll vote to adopt the resolution
With
amended,
yeah.
provided blah, 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 and either Zeb or I will make that amendment. It's generally minor or clerical
Yeah.
on the written copy for the presiding officer to sign that day. And
So-
that can happen after the meeting, because we're listening and trying to pay attention and support you during. So having the resolution read aloud as amended during the meeting is certainly something that you can do, but it may prolong your meetings
Yeah.
if there have to be substantial changes. But we can accommodate that request.
Well, I think, Jamie, can we ask like you to make this better and make it how it actually, like what you just said, basically, like the clerical, like if there's an amendment to a resolution, we vote on the substance of it and give staff direction to make the clerical change, and then we don't have to wait a whole nother month to read, so that's what I think that needs to say. I don't think it needs to say what it says, but I would look to someone who drafts these things to make it better.
Absolutely.
Okay, and last page 12 of 14.
12?
So this one's we just put in sort of the commission budget, because I had a question when I started, where's our budget from? So this, lets whoever's reading these rules know that we're part of the city of New Bern. We prepare ours in the same manner as other departments of the municipality. And then we ask that, the executive director prepares a draft and we review it. So I just have a blank there because I guess that's historically been our process. I don't remember what month we did the budget. Was it like November? Do you have to adopt it before the beginning of the year or?
Yeah, so in November when we did it last year, it was an amendment to the budget because previously, in June, when I came on, one of the first things I asked as a consultant is for the budget, and there was none on file. And so we began working on that from June to November to get an amendment drafted. We adopted an amendment last year. This year, our budget is already in progress and working on projections, and I hope to have the commission side of the RDC budget presented to you all no later than May.
So
And then it will take effect July 1.
So it's the end of the fiscal year for the city is June 30th?
Yeah.
And you all would need to make any revisions, consideration, offer any feedback before staff presents it to the governing board, because your budget is included in the city's budget ordinance.
Correct.
So Sarah, you're asking for, do we put a date in here, on or before what date?
Yeah, and maybe we don't need to, maybe we just strike that, but I didn't even know the process, so this was one of my yellow questions, like, what is the
Okay.
process? Because
Yeah.
I don't know that we've actually historically, followed a whatever process.
We
So
have
maybe we just leave it generic, that you'll prepare a draft annual budget, and we already say along the same procedures as other, so I don't know that we need a date.
Okay.
Unless folks, I feel like you're gonna do your job, so I don't think I need to hold you. You just told me what your job was, so I'm fine with it.
Finance department makes me do it
Yeah.
regardless of.
And then if we're gonna call them project teams, maybe just update 19. And then Jamie, question for you. Appendix A is just sort of attached but not referenced, and this again is like a contract lawyer brain. Do we need to reference it anywhere, or folks just know, even in 20 at the very end or something, we also adopt that, because we may add other appendices at some point.
It's certainly, you can add a rule 21, and say that we shall utilize appendix A
Yeah.
and
In
dispose
for
of property.
property, yeah, like that. And then I don't know if we need to talk anymore about what we did to shorten the property purchasing, if that's already been discussed, but I don't need to. That just didn't review the notes. I think I talked about it. So, sorry if that was lengthy, I just had
No, you did your job.
questions, so,
We appreciate you doing that work.
sorry it took a while.
I can see why it did.
And Madam Chair, considering there's going to be some revisions to several of the rules, perhaps what you do today is just get a consensus to utilize Appendix A for the disposition of property, if that's the pleasure of the commission. And then at the February meeting, we can bring back the revised rules of procedure. That way everybody can see the codified or the proposed language for all the rules.
Okay.
I feel like they were more clerical. Would it not be prudent to just like allow you to do the clerical things and adopt them like that? Would you rather us have the final document in front of us and do it in February?
To my mind, I'm not a legal mind, but to my mind, this is a living document, so it's always going to be in flux, and there's never really a final version to it.
Yeah.
So if it's the will of the commission to adopt the rules of procedures with recommended amendments to be reviewed in February, I don't find a problem with that. Do you?
Okay. Can we discuss the main differences of the protocols for purchase and property and by the RDC, just how that process has been shortened?
Sure.
Really quick, sorry,
No.
Commissioner Parham, but you're like, I'm good.
So the big change is that the people's request, their proposed redevelopment plans will not be referred to a work or project group. Individuals seeking to purchase property from this commission will come to the full body in a meeting, make their presentation about their redevelopment project. You all in Living Code will have an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. It's recommended, obviously, that staff engage with that individual to make sure that their presentation to you is robust. And then at the conclusion of that first meeting, when that individual or entity makes their presentation, you will have the opportunity to vote to initiate the upset bid process. That's the most significant change.
I think the key there is that staff is going to be involved with the potential buyer from the beginning, so that you're bringing to the commission what we need to hear and see.
Yeah, within 3 business days of someone making a request to purchase to the city clerk, staff, I will reach out to them. I will work with them. I know your questions. I've heard them. I know the restrictive covenants, and I've worked with all of you rather closely. So I'll make sure that I ask those questions. I'll bring you the information before the meeting, so that you have time to review it, ask additional questions, so that when people come in and take the time, citizens come in and take the time to make a presentation, which can be, quite frankly, rather nerve-wracking for a citizen to make a presentation to a board. Your questions are already answered, so that we can be a soft, empathetic commission that is advocating for the citizens that come to us. So that when their requests go to the board of aldermen, we're saying, hey, this is a project we believe in, and we already have that question answered before anyone comes before us. You still do retain, I just want to point out, that you still do retain the ability as a commission, if during the live meeting that there comes up a question that we didn't anticipate, you can table it for further consideration, and these procedures do allow that. But with this procedure as outlined, from a time perspective, you're literally taking the minimum time each request comes before the commission from 3 to 1 is the minimum. Then we'll the upset bid will be initiated, and then they don't have to come back for us to accept their bid and move it to the Board of Aldermen. Does that make sense?
It does. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to ask, where did the protocol of like having to do a presentation come from, and is that necessary? Like, is there a way to just get in writing, like, I just want to buy this to build a house on it to live on? Like, do we really need, because that is daunting for some people. I'm not a public speaker. It would be like my nightmare. So, but I'm just asking like where that came from, and do we need that if we feel like we're getting enough written information beforehand, or maybe we do.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So in the outset, before we had dedicated staff and it was just the commissioners, by and large, trying to figure out how to implement all of these things, there was not a streamlined way for the commission to get information about these proposed projects.
Yeah.
And very often, people would come and there perhaps were questions they hadn't thought about. So having an opportunity to hear from the person live, to ask questions and to fully flesh out what the project was proposed to be was advantageous at that time. And if you all, would like written documentation from, proposed redevelopers, you certainly can do so. Or if you would allow, if you want some other type of way to gather information, if you'd like staff to make a presentation about the proposed redevelopment project, that's within your discretion if you'd like to make any amendments.
I think maybe we should have either or, so it won't put the person on the spot.
I think the language in the procedures, it just says presentation, and it sort of implicit in that language, to my mind, is similar to what we did with the 808 and 810 Bern Street presentation. The actual purchaser wasn't comfortable because English is a second language. So he had an advocate come up and present for him. Staff would have been happy to present for him, and all of that is permissible under these procedures as written.
Okay, so the presentation to the commission is important, not necessarily who gives the presentation.
Correct.
Okay.
Step 5 says potential buyer or his or her designee.
So that can be staff if needed.
The other thing about having a written presentation is you have something to hold that individual accountable for if he doesn't do what he tells us. I mean, I've been through so many planning board meetings where the people have to lie to you. I mean, seriously, about what they're proposed to do. Everyone's saying is the zoning, and all it does is increase the value of the property, but they have no intent and never do carry out with the implementation of what they tell you. And so having a written proposal that they sign kind of creates some credibility or some information for us to hold them accountable to. And the other thing that is interesting in this process is, and we've talked about this before, is it's going to the upset bid process. So that person might not be the buyer of the property.
Correct.
Yeah.
And whoever buys it at the end, we have no idea what they're planning on doing with it.
Well,
Yeah,
we don't have to, actually, as a commissioner, and I should probably let Jamie speak to it, but just because they're outbid or the bid is upset doesn't mean we have to accept the upset
But I
bid.
thought I heard you say that part would be eliminated, coming back to us for approval of the
No, the purchaser doesn't have to come back for a second
purchase.
meeting.
Okay.
But you definitely have to approve who the final highest bidder is.
Yeah.
And at any point in that process, you can say, no, thank you. So if the initial redeveloper who makes the presentation presents something that's beautiful and consistent with your proposed redevelopment plan, but the final highest bidder is, even though the restrictive covenants that you are imposing would go with the property, if their take on the proposed redevelopment plan is different or not consistent with what you think, or there's some other objective metric, if you find that, you know what, we've got another developer that's going to do a cluster as opposed to just one single development, we decide we don't want to sell the property anymore, you still have that opportunity.
And then the last thing I'll say, and that we do not have time today, but we have to have a broader conversation, and maybe this is for a project team, about our restrictive covenants. Like, are we gonna have a standard slate, like the low income and the no junk car, like whatever are, what we normally put, do we need that? But I'm a little confused, and that sort of goes with the, direction we wanna go in with redeveloping the area. So I think at some point, we need to think about those more.
Okay.
Not this point.
And heard what you said time-wise too. So I'd like to wrap up the policy and procedure one, and my guess, I could be wrong, is that nobody's really going to pour over this document once you have made those changes, because they're mostly clerical. If I could get a motion to accept this and the Appendix A once it has, as, how do you say it, accept it with the changes we discussed today. Yeah.
So moved.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. And we've had discussion. Do we need to have more discussion to accept this?
No, Chair.
Nope. Okay. Let's vote on it then. This is a resolution to accept the policies and procedures with Appendix A with the changes we have discussed today. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay? And the ayes have it. So those are our three resolutions, I believe. And do you want to say something, Zeb?
I was just going to make the recommendation that on item 7, we flip-flop item 7 and 8, as Commissioner Morgan has expressed a specific time restraint, and we're getting later into our time. So
Okay.
he has a presentation that he did request to make.
So
So
we'll do that, because these, I'm going to say this, these presentations, this information we're talking about now, and as Sarah said, maybe even looking at our covenants are going to be, we think that's where our project teams are going to come in.
Yep.
Okay. I will let you do
Oh, yeah, I'm
your
sorry. I was,
neighborhood development project.
right, I would like to, I guess since there are no more work groups, I'm going to submit, this is raw material, and if I can find it. This would just be submitted as raw material or as something that'll make the go And this is only going to be one man's opinion, and that's why this needs to change. In order for the neighborhood team to be effective, it's going to require that all members of the commission take part in our future efforts. This particular defunct work group has not been effective in terms of production toward the goals of the commission. We simply placed a bandage on a gaping wound and have rerouted the bleeding that is now hemorrhaging. I'll be the first to admit that the past neighborhood updates have had no substance and no direction. Number one, in our efforts to continue with community cleanup projects, but they must be ramped up with including news coverage, sponsors, contributors, community groups, churches, etc. We must feed and even have a program to recognize certain individuals and welcome all input to engage local residents. Number two, we must go door to door in somewhat of an old school census type information to get hard data. This hard data will help us to better understand and identify renters versus owner-occupied, number of adults in a household, veterans, children in the household, ages, average income if possible, and I don't know what's legal and what is not legal, but this information will not be mailed in on a postcard if it's left with the community. It will be trashed and discarded because there's a lack of trust. This will be a clipboard endeavor, and the information will need to be actually asked, answered, and brought back to the commission. The commission will be needed to identify which questions can and cannot be asked, what information would be relevant and what information would be worthless. It's my hope that this data would also help in future hopes of obtaining grants and other monies available. Comparing this data and working in conjunction with New Bern PD will give the commission a better insight as to crime in that area. Number three, we need to have resources in place to share uplifting or mobility options for financial assistance, relocation, sales, and/or purchase information for those that would like to become homeowners. Information can be provided on classes where you can learn not only how to own a home, but how to care for it. Join in partnerships with companies such as Lowe's to have neighborhood beautification contests where Lowe's will match the commission dollar for dollar for their lawn and garden supplies for landscaping or etc. Partnerships with Craven Community College for those that may need or want to improve their lives through scholarship. We must reevaluate our bus stop locations to maximize the efforts of safety and time. Where are the school-aged children living? Where are the roads that are most and least traveled? The redevelopment area has more foot traffic as a means of transportation than any other part of the city. This hard data will identify where the traffic infractions are, and we must incorporate broadband throughout the area. What was a luxury is now a necessity. I'm asking the commission to make the necessary adjustments to ensure that each commissioner take part in the endeavor, not to make this a committee goal, but a commitment to get boots on the ground, to be an instrument to collect this data and move forward with making a difference and understanding that the dire need is now. If not now, when? And that's what I was talking about when I meant the dissolution of the working groups. So that's what I was pretty much getting at. And it's going to take everybody. It's going to take the whole commission. And I have not provided you with that hard data. And I've just merely given you an overview of the landscape. Some of the most boring neighborhood updates ever. But we really do need to move in a different direction and get some substance, get some hard data. The attorney left, but I need to, we need to find out what we can do. If we can get certain census information, but if you leave something with the community on a mailer to be mailed back in to get the information that we need to move forward, it's not going to be mailed in. It's going to be a waste of paper and a waste of good postage. This is going to be a clipboard endeavor that needs to be asked, answered, and submitted. And that's why we need the whole board to be able to add and to bring up other things that I've left out. This is just an overview of some things that have not been done by the neighborhood team that needs to be done. And
Commissioner Morgan,
yes, sir.
I would really appreciate if you would give me a hard copy of what you read. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's all I need is a hard copy. Thank you.
And they were I appreciate you bringing up other aspects of healthy community development. One that resonated with me was resource availability. We've talked about CDBG funds and people not knowing that they can, if they own a home, can get their home repaired, how much money they can get on an annual basis. There's every year the city gets money for that. And I feel like there's a huge disconnect with the people who need the money. And so that's just brought into that community development as well. So I appreciate you expanding that into more of a really a health and wellness approach of how we can help the community.
Yes.
Okay.
I wonder if there's a way to partner with, because it's in here exactly how many residents are in the area, but I mean, with just this number of commissioners, I think it would be a long time to have the time to go door to door. So that you brought up a lot of good things, and I totally agree, we need more boots on the ground, because at the end of the day, who are we helping? It's the people. We always talk about the land, because that's what, we're looking at, but it's really about the people who live there, making this area better for them, so being more focused on them. But things I heard you say were a lot of foot traffic. In our original plan was addressing lighting. How's the lighting in the area? What can we do to help that? Broadband, do they really not have like Optimum or internet or anything over there? And if not, there are grants. for broadband. There are different, public assistance, like federal or state programs. I don't know any of them, I just know that it might be a thing. So is there some sort of, team we could do to address those issues and then think more about how do we get boots on the ground? And I know some of the questions you're talking about with the clipboard, we're not gonna be allowed to ask, like, just from a legal.
But how would we be
standpoint.
with volunteers or with school or with young adults who, and I mean, I'm not talking about imploring them or paying, well, I don't know.
Okay, before you say anything else. So the city has a lot of demographic information already on file. Alice with GIS, who came to many of our meetings when we first got started, has access to a lot of that. She's a wizard, and I can't say I don't really understand all the things that she does, but she might be able to provide you with a lot of the most recent information that you're talking about how many kids are in the school system, single-family households, who the head of household are, maybe not address by address, but general aggregate information from you. If you like that, just request that from staff, and you might be able to make a presentation by way of update from what we got back in 2018.
And it also occurs to me, we're going to have to take small bites. Our redevelopment area is a very large area. It encompasses land we don't hardly talk about sometimes. And so we need to have focus areas. And that could be a team of a focused area within that.
Question for
It's too much to take on the whole,
Right.
even a whole neighborhood like that. Yes, sir.
Question for Rodney. What area are you talking about in particular?
The redevelopment area as a whole,
What area? She mentioned Ward 5.
from the cemetery on Bern Street all the way up to Broad Street, from 3rd Avenue all the way back to East Road Street, and also walk Bellamy Drive, all up through Jones, all up to Trent Court, and back up in.
So you're talking about the whole area, that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Okay. I know some areas are worse than others, so that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, but, and I think that even some of the information that has previously been obtained by the city is not that accurate. And I know it's almost impossible to go home, and definitely for this commission, with just the numbers that we have here, to be able to get out and to put a dent in it in any substantial time frame. By the time that we did obtain all of the information, it would have changed and it would have been antiquated anyway. But there's got to be a way that we can get the information in so that we can get the information out to find out who needs what. I'm sure, there are so many veterans that don't even have copies of their DD-214s that need to have them. Without that DD-214, you can get no benefits at death, which really bothers me, and it hits me personally because I didn't run anybody's PT form. I didn't join the armed forces, but there are so many of them. It's not what they're being given, it's what they've earned through an honorary discharge that they're not receiving. And even if they have been seen in a VA hospital, they're still not getting the emotional, mental, or physical attention that they need and that they deserve and that they've earned. So that's another big thing. I don't even know if we have a VA office that's open here in New Bern anymore.
If I may, Mr. Morgan, I think what your recommendation is to make sure that embedded in all of the project teams that we have going forward is this aspect of community development, whereby we're actually getting into the communities where we're working so that we can get hard numbers and data so that we can be a part of the solution to make that pipeline a little bit more accurate and a little bit more true to what's actually on the ground, and so that we can assess need that is not need that is perceived. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We have to get surgical with this, and even with the bus stops in the morning, and as my fellow educator will tell you, that there are certain times of the school year where kids are waiting out at the school bus in the dark. And some of them are not well lit. And sometimes it is not a safe situation. And as I said, there's more walking transportation, not more walking traffic, but people who are walking as a means of transportation to get from point A to point B in that area. And we have more green space in that area, which can cause cover sometimes for some events that are not above board. So we do have to make sure that we are addressing everything.
Maybe I can answer one of your questions. There's a VA office out on Martin Luther King Drive, right in front of the
It
Digg.
is.
It used to be at the health department, but they moved there.
Right.
Beautiful office, good help, so anybody you know, you
Yeah.
can send them out to Martin Luther King.
But we still have to identify some of these that are available for some of these services, and that they need to apply for their DD 214s. A lot of them have not applied for them, they don't know where they are. A lot of these school-age children, it's just a lot that has to be covered. And with everybody's input from the board, everybody's gonna have a different viewpoint, a different opinion. And I think that with the dissolution of the working groups, that we all can have some input into what needs to be done and what data is gonna be needful and what's gonna be worthless. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to talk briefly too about another plan that we've talked about, some of the development projects. Proposed that we have several areas of property we've been working for a few years to make attractive to developers. One of them being a group of lots on A Street. West A Street. And I don't know if there's 3 lots, 4, 6. Okay.
The new ones, we just tore the house down, right? Did we just tear our house down?
We approved,
Not yet.
we approved the demolition.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, I think Commissioner Paraguay actually has some more information, and if you'll pass that to me, I'll copy it for everybody. And get that while you talk.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Davis. You have the address on that?
He's getting that copy made for, because that, I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm trying to remember this because it's got the redevelopment circle.
This is celebration and retirement. I gotta go introduce my,
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's the railroad track.
I sent you.
Okay, so this one we up here.
There it is, there it is.
On the railroad track.
Sweet horizon. Thank you all.
So Commissioner Paraguay, if you want to give an introduction, I'll get these things copied for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr.
One of the projects,
You don't want that pen back.
Okay.
All right, you all have a good day.
one of the projects the old housing work group has looked at over the years is A Street. In taking the lead from the Redevelopment Commission goals of accumulating property to either entice an outside developer or utilize ourselves if that became the only option we had. A Street, it becomes a very attractive area. You got single family houses from whatever the street down below is up to our property. We acquired by gift, I guess it was, Jamie, wasn't it, from the 710 Trust many years ago, the first piece of A Street. And then we had the county, it was the city-county property that was in the request of the 10 lots that we wanted to add to that, to give us a strip of land that you'll see when you get the copies of the presentation. And it gives us 236 feet of frontage. Once we get the houses, there's currently 3 dilapidated houses on the property where we've already approved demolition. So we will then have a clean strip of property that if you develop it into 40-foot wide lots, for instance, you can end up with six properties. There's also property on the very end up at the railroad, a little triangular piece of property that we would like to acquire that could be used to buffer, create a vegetative buffer against the railroad to make those lots along there much more attractive rather than just looking at train tracks. We planted trees and some vegetation on that particular property.
But be careful with that kid, the railroad come back and take property from you.
Well, it's outside of the railroad right away, but they might come back. This piece of property, if we pursue the work on it, in the presentation you'll see, there's a list of things we would have to do to make it attractive to an outside developer or even to ourselves to utilize. There's several things that we have to look at as part of the housing goal for the community. And it is to attract an outside developer, first thing we have to do is prove the market. And we're beginning to do that with the Walt Bellamy property, that there is a market in the redevelopment for new housing and for people to purchase and acquire for home ownership. So that's part of what we have to do in developing a story that we present to an outside developer. We have to be able to prove the market and prove values of what the properties could sell for. So in looking at the A Street property, it is the next logical place that we would need, I think that we would want to develop housing. We have the volume there that would be somewhat interesting in being 6 lots. And so it's this an area that we think we're want to pursue during the upcoming year to get in a position to either build on when we are finished with the Walt Bellamy houses, because we will have that financial ability to begin construction of new properties and or attract an outside developer, independent developer to work on.
Can I add to your
Yes, sir.
presentation? I'm not in the business of lot cleaning, but I've been looking at a piece of property on First Avenue. I think you sit on several lots on that. In my opinion, I think that what new houses will give the people, most of them are rentals, and incentive to buy, especially when they're paying just as much in rent than a new house is run. So, we'd like to get the consent on board to look into that and see what could be done or whatever.
Well, Jimmy,
Don't want to get too much ahead of the
no, we know the property you're talking about, and we talked to it in the presentation, why we're favoring A Street over First Avenue. First Avenue has much more potential to create a unique neighborhood within the redevelopment zone. But it also takes more work. There's more work involved with that in acquiring properties and planning than A Street is.
I understand
And
that.
so for immediate opportunity, A Street presents a more immediate opportunity to create housing opportunities than First Avenue. First Avenue creates more opportunity to create something unique, but the time it's going to take to get that to that point is.
Yeah, I didn't want to put no time restraint on it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's
So
something we
no,
can
we
look
have
at,
not.
get it cleaned up
Yeah.
and make it attractive.
Yeah.
A lot of work
We have-
has to be done there
Yeah.
in order to get it available.
Yeah.
Houses got to be torn down, trees got to be cut, and you can make it attractive.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're talking about in even what we have to do on A Street.
Yeah.
Is when we demo a piece of property, all they do is take the house away. There's probably another 25 feet of bushes and garbage and everything to the rear property line. So the property, by looking at it riding by, has shrunk over what it really is. So we need to again go in and clear the land, not just the house.
And that way people come out, actually identify where the lot is too.
Yeah.
What the lot
Yeah.
is composed of.
Now, I'll just run down, we talked about why it's the quiet neighborhood, it's out of the floodplain. We've done a lot of work there. We've done field topo on that site. We have that, and it's included in your potential. And there's an opportunity, you can see the layout back in the plats further, what the yield can be for either 35-foot or 40-foot projects. You get the project to be get the site to be project ready. We need to research the title on the county property, acquire the adjacent triangular property that we talked about a little while ago. We need to complete survey of the property, identify the existing water and sewer connections, and demolish the existing houses, and then clear the site to the boundary lines and preserve a tree or two if we can on those sites.
Commissioner Paraguay, did
Yeah.
I hear you recommending making the West A Street an active project team? Are you asking the commission for that direction?
I'm presenting an opportunity for the commission to discuss and make a decision on. The development options we have, if we do the above to get it project ready, is to identify an outside developer to work on the site. We can develop it and sell just lots there, or the redevelopment commission can build homes for a housing partner, such as the Housing Authority or Community Action Committee or whatever. There with rolling the proceeds out of Walt Bellamy, rolling them into this project is just not another opportunity. And then why not First Avenue? Jimmy, as we just discussed, requires more property acquisition, requires more demolition, and requires more complete neighborhood planning rather than just housing planning.
So am I understanding you correctly, though, it's not an either or for the redevelopment commission, it's a let's start with A. And
Start with A.
move
And
into-
again, it goes back to, we have to prove a market. We don't want to be building houses forever and ever, but if we get an outside developer involved, we have to prove that there's a market for the housing that they would develop. And we're starting that process with Walt Bellamy, and by going, we can do this again with A Street.
What kind of incentive would you give an outside developer to take that task on?
That's for further discussion.
Right.
I like that it's kind of a cross and the other, opposite side of the Walt Bellamy project, so we're spreading out the love, and we're already talking about the, wellness center on the other side now, so that area is feeling neglected. It's not exactly the same area, but, I like the A Street thought anyway.
So our first project team's getting going?
We got whatever it is. We got whatever it is.
I know we do,
We
and
sure do.
we have several, and I'm not sure I know, we're knocking on the end of our time, and we could go into much more robust discussion about project groups. I am open to suggestions on how to work through that. Is it ponder the things we've talked about today and express your interest, and then in our next regular scheduled meeting, we acknowledge, who's working on what, we've got that information up. People can get in touch with you and express their interest on where they would like to be involved. Because all these things take time. And if you're not interested, or if it's not something you feel like you have expertise or experience, or it might not be the best fit. So, the ones I've heard today are the Avenue, the A Street project. I've heard, still maybe even looking at our sale document and looking at restrictions and covenants for that. I've heard, we still have property that we didn't talk about today, but we do have property, I never can remember the name of the street, that's where the McCarter House was.
Yeah,
That-
Bloomfield.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bloomfield. There's a lot of opportunity there and a lot of research and you know, teamwork. Neighborhood development and small projects that increase the overall well-being of the neighborhood. You know, whether it's lighting, whether it's safety, whether it's more. We've done a lot. They're getting rid of all those cars, and there have been neighborhood cleanups. And fortunately, neighborhood cleanup is not incumbent on us. There are other groups who are doing that as well. We can participate with them. So I hear those being tossed in. Anybody else want to put out a proposal? Or Zeb, did you hear something else?
Well, the question I was asking, do I or should I ask the board permission to look in that First Avenue?
Well, I think what we're doing now is.
I mean, my big personally look into, not acquire it, or just see what it's about, how many houses you can get on there, who owns it. That's something I can do, not being a buyer.
No, I understand what you're saying, and some of that information is already existing because that development, that opportunity's been in people's minds for a while. What might be something for you all to consider is reflect on this conversation today, and between now and your next meeting, communicate to staff the projects that you identify. So, Mr. Dillahunt, you're identifying First Avenue as a project. Mr. Paragoy is identifying West A Street as a project. We have a Bloomfield project. Communicate those projects to staff. That way he can aggregate that information. And if there's a bunch of people who are all identifying the same project, then maybe that's higher up on the list. And then at your next meeting, which is February 15th, you'll have an opportunity to talk about, do we want to establish these particular project groups, who's going to be on them, and what are those project groups going to be tasked with doing?
And so I was privy to the information that Chip has. I didn't know about the A Street project.
Okay, and perhaps you can get with staff to get the A Street information as well as the previous existing First Avenue information. I don't know exactly what lots you're referring to, but the Redevelopment Commission owns several lots on First Avenue.
Yeah.
So some of those are already in the redevelopment, not the city's possession, and you can get that information and reflect upon that as you move forward to your next meeting.
Absolutely. That's all I want to know.
Yes, sir.
Do we still own Bloomfield?
According to
Good question.
GIS, we do.
Well, we had a resolution passed 6 months ago to transfer that back to the city, along with their $300,000.
We still own it. I think we still have, well, I mean, it might be in the city's hand, but I still think, push come to shove, we can get, you know, we can.
Well, this is the problem with it, while we're wrapping up. This is the problem with it. We can't even have a meeting over there about health and wellness. Went over there, you were there, went over there to speak with health and wellness. And even though certain individuals are there trying to get them riled up about what the hospital said and what they didn't say, they wasn't focused on that. They said, Tabar, we got you, we can understand you moving it, we understand, we're good. But the entire focus was you tore that McCullough house down. And you told us, it's been 2 years, you told us something would be there. It's not there. So it's stopping all of our progress moving forward with the neighborhood because of a trust issue. Because we tore that house down and we put nothing else there. It's been 2 years.
Yeah.
So now if I gotta go out of the law, I want a group, but we gotta get, I'm not gonna be able to do
Project
anything
on-
else. The Bloomfield, where the house used to be,
Yeah.
even a duplex, I don't care if we put we just gotta put something there.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
there's
agree.
something's gotta go in that spot, because that's all they talk about. I gotta meet on the 31st, I'm terrified to walk in front of it, because that's what it's gonna be about.
And I agree with you 100%, and I feel like that is that loose end, that we did
Yeah.
vote to send that back to the city. So as far as we know and on paper, the city owns that and took the money. So we need to have
That
that.
was a recommendation. All this board, all
Okay.
this commission has the power to do is make recommendations.
So they didn't.
Well, let me put a pin there. I'm hearing a conversation here that gives staff direction to figure out what the status of the Bloomfield property is.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
That is what you heard.
Okay, that's what will be done.
Oh, good.
And so, to be clear, I've received consensus around the board, around the table, to receive project proposals to be proposed during the new business section of our February 15th meeting, whereby we will decide as a commission what projects we will pursue in the next year. Yep.
Yes, and I would like, can you also be in contact with Robbie about that?
Yes.
Because I feel like he had a lot of great ideas, but I'd like a finer pinpoint on a project that could be done. You know, there's a lot of things to be done, but we need something to do, a specific area or a specific task.
Madam Chair, one other thing too, mine's very short. We come up with a lot of ideas and a lot of things cross our mind. And some things, you know, we want to reach out and do. But in the meantime, as we think about these things, we need to start thinking about who's doing some of these things, become partnership with some folks.
Absolutely.
Because we can't do it all. And then there's some people that's doing certain things, all we need to do is kind of bring them to the table and say, look, we're part of redevelopment, you're doing this, can you help with this project? You know, those kind of things.
Right.
Because we can't do everything, but we can bring people that are already doing some things to the table and then help us.
I agree, and it's a paradigm shift, because I heard Commissioner Dillahunt's question, or who are we in competition with for this? And I heard Reggie's answer is we should be in partnership with all these people that have the resources to do the things. Other people who are already doing things, we just need to bring them in so, you know, they can do it within our boundaries and meet our goals.
Yeah, and
It's a good point.
Yeah. Something down the road, and I'll say this, you know, you got 3 or 4 probably committees that are trying to do something in the Duffield area, different little groups here and there. Somewhere down the line, we probably need to think about calling them all in and say, look, let's have a roundtable discussion. You want to do this, you want to do this. You know, all of us need to just kind of get out there what you want to do, and then let's highlight each other's best part, and then go and support them on that. Because everybody trying to do a little of this, and a whole lot of progress.
And you're right, it's not our competition.
Yeah.
It-
It's on
We're
Thursday,
working together.
February 1st, latest on 6 o'clock. BB. Phoenix Project, Land Shout, People's Assembly, Barbara Sampson, Betty Sampson, I'm sorry, and Duffield Regulars Council, and the greater Duffield area.
Yes, a whole lot,
Video
yeah.
makers. If y'all can come, if not,
What's the agenda?
Health and wellness. I hope the hospital should be there like the mini one we had with the Duffield Residents Council. So much angst came out of it. So there's a whole lot of other people other than those hand-chosen ones that were there that want to be heard about how glad they are to health and wellness things. And that we're scrapping the bodega. They'll be glad to hear that. I mean, I just can't get nothing back from the bodega, y'all. So that's why we're going to residential, but we got to put something.
I'm just sorry that things that we discussed in closed session
Got
out
out.
there.
That's right. It's a shame. It's a violation of state ethics.
That has really been, for me, that has really been the hurtful part, and it's really just helped. It just created some bad feeling of trust. You discuss stuff in executive session, and next thing you know, you at a meeting sharing that information.
And
That's just not right.
right now, at this point in time, I'm gonna have to put a lid on that discussion.
Okay, that's
Because
fine.
that is a closed session
Oh, yeah, you're right.
item that we've been talking about, and I don't want to spend any more time on that this morning.
Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely.
Good deal.
As long as it's not about the Health and Wellness Center. Okay.
Well, we have to do downtown instead of here.
Amen to that. Now, that's a great
That
question.
was a city directive for us.
That's a great question.
We used to meet here all the time.
That's what I did, and I really wasn't changed.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, can we come back home?
Yeah, I love
Mike's is so
this.
much better
It
here.
is.
Yeah, I like it better.
And you got one.
You do. You have more room, and we can look at each other in the
Yeah.
face easier
Yeah.
to discuss
Let us
things.
come home.
And we COVID. And, just say that.
Zeb, can we give you directions?
I agree.
Please,
Yes.
ask, so we can come home.
Except that it wasn't
Okay.
Just say that, just say that. We-
I feel like we'll be more productive
Yes.
if the redevelopment commission could meet in this
Yes.
conference room on the regular. Just saying.
In
Yes.
8
On the
months, I can
record.
get you a write-up of why we'll be better.
Yeah.
And let me say this, COVID's on the rise, I guess all of them know. And we have more room to
Here.
scatter. That's one of the reasons I make that up.
I appreciate all of your comments, and I will take that direction and run with it.
We're counting on you, Zeb.
I make no
I-
promises whatsoever. I will
the man.
report back to the commission.
Clearly, this could have been an all-day event. And I appreciate you guys. I really do appreciate you bringing Reggie in to talk to us. I feel like he was, gave us information and food for thought we hadn't had in a while, or maybe at all. So I really appreciate that, and hearing from everybody and having everybody here was nice. Thank you for the food. We all enjoyed that. Kept us going. That's probably could last all day, but I don't want to. I know everybody's time is valuable, and I really appreciate you guys making the effort to get here so we can get this on the books. I think it gives us even more credibility to know that everybody's ready to give up their personal time above and beyond to make sure we're moving in the right direction and working on projects that matter.
Yeah. You guys did a lot of work today. I want to commend all of you and thank all of you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Are you sure? Let's vote. All in favor?